Well, first of all, welcome. We're glad to see each and every one of you here today. This is our 7th meeting as we've traveled around the state of Georgia, trying to talk to everyone to get input on transportation and the funding of transportation as we move forward in this state. As we've said from the beginning, nothing's off the table. We're willing to listen to anything and everything and all suggestions. But we want to hear from you, the people of the state of Georgia, and what your vision is to help us try to fund transportation as we move not 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, but 20 years down the road. We're not looking for a short-term solution. We're looking for a long-term solution. So with that being said, I'm actually going to now turn it over to, I guess nobody needs an introduction to this man around here, the Speaker of the House, Speaker Ralston.
Thank you.
Just tape.
Yeah. I'll go.
Notice they're turning around up here so that I'm not looking at their backs or doing something to their backs. But thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman Roberts and Chairman Gooch. I want to thank you all, first of all, for your wisdom in selecting this community as a venue for one of your hearings. Chairman Roberts called me a few months ago and said he wanted to do a meeting up here. I said, I promise you in November we will not have gnats. So we got you some cold temps, but it's that time of year. But thank you all for being here, and I want to thank all of you for being here. But I want to give a special thank you to this committee. I know that y'all have worked very hard. You've traveled great distances this year, and I've kept up with your work, and I look forward to sitting down with you once you complete the hearing process later this week to hear your version of what you have heard from Georgians. Your work is extremely important because there are not many issues as important as transportation to our future, and that means how we fund our transportation future. I'm proud that we have a very professional department, and I'm glad the commissioner's here, and he's got a great vice chairman of his board that's here, and probably other board members are here, and I'm pleased with the work that they're doing. But you know, we are at a critical point in terms of transportation, and we have big decisions that need to be made. And I don't know the exact form that those will take, but I challenge this group to work hard to find a consensus that does take us not 5 or 10 years down the road, but for generations to come. Georgia is a big state. It's getting bigger. It's growing, and we have to be prepared to address that growth. And then those of us in the political arena have to have the resolve and the courage to see it through. So I want to tell you that you have my full support with whatever you come back with in terms of a consensus, and that we will make this a priority in the 2015 session and going forward. And so I want to commend you for the great work that you've already done and what you will continue to do. I'm very, very proud of this group, and I'm proud of what you've done, and I appreciate all of you that have engaged in that. I wish I could be here with you all day today, but I've got to run off. I'm speaking to the Fannin County retired teachers momentarily, and I look forward to that. We had a great meeting of the Fannin County Chamber earlier today, and some of you were there, and I appreciate your being in attendance. And I can tell you that that group and others, I spoke to a chamber group, I guess Monday, down at the Capitol, and a couple of weeks ago down at Lake Oconee, and I know that the business community in Georgia and all Georgians that are interested in job growth and economic development are prepared to engage and support the work of this group as I am. So thank you for being here. I hope you enjoy your time here in Fannin County. Mr. Chairman Roberts, if you would let them leave early enough to go shopping and spend lots of money, I would appreciate that while they're here too. So thank you all very much, and thanks for being here.
Mr. Speaker, we thank you for your leadership. You've done an outstanding job leading our House, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. You've done a great job, and we appreciate everything that you've done. So, thank you. With that being said, also another local person that I know needs no introduction to each and every one of you, but at this time, Miss Emily, GDOT board member from this area, we would like for you to come. Do you want to come say a few words, or you can? We'd love for you to. Thank you, Miss Emily. Thank you for your leadership on the board. You know, we've got a great board now at GDOT. They're doing a great job, and things are really going well over there, and it's because of people like Miss Emily and others that are on that board that's helped to turn that around and that perception. They're doing a great job, and we commend them for that. With that being said, we will now start to my right over here with the vice chairman of my committee. And everybody introduce yourself around so that everybody will know.
I'm Valerie Clark from Gwinnett County. Left 40 minutes early, and it was a transportation issue. So I'm delighted to be here and so proud to be part of this committee. It's so important.
Good morning. I'm Judson Hill. I'm serving the Senate, represent part of Cobb County and part of Sandy Springs, and probably the epicenter of, and also our commissioner, Keith Golden. I'm proud to be a servant to him, and we're in the epicenter of the transportation issues in Atlanta. Looking forward to great solutions here, and thank you for the opportunity to be a part of the committee today.
Hi, I'm Hala Modelmog. I am President and CEO of the Metro Atlanta Chamber, and I too am really thrilled to be a part of this group. I'm fairly new in my role, and it's been really wonderful to get to know this group who is very serious about the issues that we're facing, and we certainly appreciate that from the business community side. And happy also to be working here with Chris Clark from the Georgia Chamber, because I think we, hopefully between us and the Georgia Chamber, we represent a lot of the business community, and obviously this eventually becomes an economic development issue. So thank you guys for including us, and we look forward to the results.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Chris Clark. I'm the president of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, and on behalf of our 24,000 members, this is the most important issue for us. It has been, will continue to be since 1915 when we were incorporated and hired a good roads director. And 100 years later, we have the Georgia Transportation Alliance, and a lot of our board members are here today. And we look forward to working with this group and the members of the Senate and the House to get something substantive passed in this next session. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Representative Terry England from Barrett County. Miss Valerie, it wasn't a bad drive from where I started from. Good to be in Fannin County and Blue Ridge, Georgia, and I always enjoy getting up in this neck of the woods.
I'm Tyler Harper. I represent the 7th Senate District in southeast Georgia, 10 counties in southeast Georgia. I'm from Ocilla, Irwin County, and it wasn't a bad drive for me either.
He flew.
It was a bad drive for me. John Burns from southeast Georgia, down in Bullock, Effingham, and Scriven counties, House District 159. Yeah, you can't get there from here. I can't get back home from here. But it's good to be with y'all. And Miss Emily, it's good. There's a big garden spot, we think, down in my part of the world. But this is definitely one of the good garden spots of our state and our country, right here in these mountains in North Georgia. Good to be with y'all. Thank y'all for being here.
I'm Brandon Beach. I represent Senate District 21, which is North Fulton and Cherokee County. Thank y'all for hosting us. Emily, thank you for what you do, and Commissioner, y'all do a great job. And again, thanks for hosting us.
Jay Roberts, I'm from South Georgia as well. I'm from Osceola, Georgia, and I represent Irwin, Ben Hill, Turner, and parts of Tifton, Coffee County.
And I'm Steve Gooch, and you're in the 51st District. Fannin County is in my district. I'm proud to have you guys here this morning. Thank you all for coming out.
I'm David Lucas, represent the 26th Senatorial District. It encompasses part of Jones, part of Houston, half of Bibb, all of Twiggs, all of Wilkerson, all of Hancock, all of Washington. 7 counties and 17 cities.
I'm State Representative Calvin Smyrie from Columbus, and I'm delighted to be here. It's been a while since I've been in Blue Ridge, but this is such a beautiful part of our state, and I'm just delighted to be here. And I consider transportation in my 4 decades in the House it's one of the most important issues that I can think of when it deals with quality of life. So I hope we can come up with something that can better serve the people of the state of Georgia. So thank you for allowing us to be here.
I'm Mark Hamilton. I represent the good citizens of Cumming in Forsyth County, not too far from here, the House District 24. It's a pleasure to be here. It really is a beautiful area, and as far as transportation funding, I'm all in.
Good morning. My name is Edward Lindsay. I'm a former state representative. I represented Buckhead and Sandy Springs for 10 years in the House until recently. The only thing I'll say about my drive up here was it got more and more pleasant with every mile that I got closer to Blue Ridge. And I look forward to working and to hearing y'all's thoughts and to working out solutions. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Kevin Little, Chairman of Walton County, President of ACCG. I'm excited to be here and representing the counties of the state of Georgia.
I'm Lamar Norton. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Municipal Association. We're delighted to be at the table as well. I thank you for allowing us to be here. Streets and sidewalks and walking paths and transit are all very, very important to our cities across the state. And just on a local note, I just saw Mayor Donna Whitener in the audience. She's the mayor of Blue Ridge, and it shows her support for this effort as well. So, Donna, thank you for being here.
Go ahead. All the local elected officials stand up. I see Chairman Bill Simon, County Commission Chairman, and Donna Whitener, and Rhonda Thomas, City Council. And then behind them are 2 of the most powerful elected officials in Georgia, Sole Commissioners Brittany Pittman and Lamar Parris. Brittany's from Murray County, Lamar Parris from Union County, right next door. So, did I miss anything? All right, next I think we're going to move on to our speakers. I think we have the Commissioner of DOT on the list first to speak. Keith, you want to come up to the microphone? Can everyone hear us in the back? Good? Okay.
Also, Chairman, I'd like for you to also acknowledge Brent Cook, who's our district engineer. Brent is actually a graduate of this high school, right? As you pointed out, He also told us that he's on the band plaques over here somewhere if we go look for him. So, and I think we also have another staff member, Bain Smith. Bain is in the room here. Bain was the district engineer up in, he's now head of our field district. So the two guys you definitely would like to get to know. But I get to come again, and I've tried to, kind of update some of the information since our last time I got the chance to present to you guys. But it's very, very sobering what's going on both at the national level and some of the challenges we're currently having in our own budgets. So I want to make sure that we highlight those today. We've talked about before we have the 10th largest transportation system in the country. Again, we continue to have a large local system, which is very important to us. The state route system, over 17,000 centerline miles. And then even our city streets, we have over 17,000 centerline miles. We have a lot of transit systems, and our general aviation airports are still all in need of funding. Those are things we've highlighted in previous meetings. I always like to highlight that GDOT has a lot of responsibilities. Many times people think we just plan and build roads, but we have a lot of responsibilities in operations, permitting, setting speed limits, access management, driveways, oversized, overweight commercial vehicle responsibilities. So a lot of different things that the department does. But we do work on planning the system, designing the system, maintaining and operating the system, and constructing the system. So it continues to be a large responsibility that we actually have. We've highlighted before, I tried to simplify the chart. In 1972, we had over 9,000 employees. In 2014, we have 4,110 employees. And so the system's gotten larger, our responsibilities have gotten more robust, but our staffing levels have gone down. And we continue to work with you guys to find innovative ways to deliver those core functions. We've also highlighted previously, and this is something I'm going to spend a little bit more time today than normal, but kind of our funding source. We're made up of about a little over $1 billion in motor fuel, state motor fuel collections, and about $1.2 billion in a normal year of federal funding, and that's why I say a normal year. And then roughly about $15 to $20 million. This is actually going up. It had gone down to somewhere in the $7 to $8 million range in general funds that fund our what we call our intermodal programs that are not roads and bridges. We've talked about before that the Highway Trust Fund is not a sustainable system. The Highway Trust Fund as we know it today. So for the folks in the audience, we send about 18.4 cents a gallon of gas goes to Washington, D.C. to fund the Highway Trust Fund. They've been keeping the funding levels at about $50 billion a year, but the trust fund is only bringing in about $32 billion, somewhere between $32 to $35 billion. So that number continues to get further apart. So the federal gas tax that we send up that we're so dependent on continues to have a larger and larger delta. This year it's even more severe, and that's why I said I'm going to spend a little bit more time today than normal. This year, Congress claimed that they fixed the trust fund, and if you talk to most of our congressmen, they'll say they fixed the trust fund, but they only funded the Highway Trust Fund through May 31st of this year, next year. So typically they would have a full year of funding. On top of that, they've only funded the budget through December 11th of this year. So as you know, they're going back to Washington to solve the budget issue for the FY15 budget that they're in, but they only gave us so far to date $229 million of what we would normally expect $1.2 billion. On top of that, when they fixed the Highway Trust Fund, they've actually set us up for just over $800 million that we will receive this year. So the legislature, when you passed your 15 budget for Georgia DOT, you made a lot of assumptions that federal dollars would be in our capital construction, capital maintenance, and other programs. Those dollars are not there. In fact, we're having to look around $400 to $500 million less this year in terms of our federal funding. And so many of you are probably getting calls and complaints from folks that you represent as we've sent them letters putting them on notice that right now we're going to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 30% less federal dollars. And so even though you may have had a project in the program that said it was going to be in 2015, we don't have those dollars appropriated to us. And so it's going to be a challenge, and you're going to continue to get those phone calls.
So are you putting those projects on hold? Are you putting some projects on
hold? Well, again, we're still waiting and seeing. We hope that they come back and early in the next year that they under the new Congress that they try to do something to fix the trust fund or prop up the trust fund. But right now, we're just trying to prioritize what we can do, and that's a challenge. And so, just to walk you through the 707. So, roughly they set up about $800 million. They give you obligation authority to spend less than they actually put into your formula. So they allow you to have about $777 million. So if Congress comes back on December 11th or before December 11th and says you can now spend the rest of this $777 million, this is what we're looking at. 752 million is where we start because the state planning and research funds and the recreational trail funds come off the top and have to go out. We have to pay the Garvey debt service. That's the federal debt that we actually have has to go out. We have to transfer the monies to the transit that we've done, as well as we had to transfer a tremendous amount of dollars this year to MARTA and to the streetcar. And then what's called advanced construct. Traditionally in Georgia, the way we get from July to October, the federal fiscal year, is we use state motor fuel to back dollars, and then we have to do some conversions on that. But if you look down those numbers, we have to transfer $40 million for the Northwest Corridor project. $20 million is set up to start the 285-400 right-of-way acquisition. $26.4 million to do the design work for that particular project. $96 million is going for the extension of the I-85 managed lanes on up to into Gwinnett County. About $4 million is set up to go to State Road Toll Authority for helping with that. $100 million is the conversion, what we call the. So remember, we used $100 million of state motor fuel to be able to leverage it on these future federal dollars. And so the $100 million is when we actually do the transfer back. Why do we have to do that? That $100 million actually creates the state motor fuel that will match all these projects, the 20% that goes into matching these projects. So we've tied up $100 million. We've got to convert it back just to be able to match these dollars. The $52 million in supplemental agreements are just things that come through the process, through construction. We've got an issue with concrete that we're having to do a new concrete specification. It's called a mass concrete, where we have large concrete. We're having to work with some contractors to make adjustments in some of our projects. $11.8 million would go out for some IT stuff. So we start with about $172 million at the bottom line, remaining for all the PE and right-of-way and construction activities for the rest of the year. That's just keeping the program going. Design work that we need to do, right-of-way that we need to be buying, and construction activities. And so we've been working with highway contractors, letting them know that that's it. That's all that there is. On top of that, we may even have to reserve some of our dollars for our HERO program and some other things going into 2016 if nothing happens. And so, again, being a slave to federal transportation dollars is something that really hampers your program. But just to give you an idea, we are not going to have a January construction letting this year. Right now it's looking very dim for February. And we'll probably be able to use some of these dollars, probably in the neighborhood of $70 or $80 million to have. We would normally have roughly $80 to $100 million lettings each month. We're probably going to be fortunate to have $100 million in lettings just between now and the end of May. We always highlight where our state motor fuel dollars go. I think it's a great time, again, to talk about this is based on projections, as you know. We'll come back to the legislature and early in the year to do some amended dollars. Normally, we would amend in $40 to $50 million of collections that came in over and above what the forecast was. This year, that's not going to happen. It's going to be in the neighborhood of $3 or $4 million is what we beat the estimates for the budget for 15 that we're in. We always like to talk to you a little bit about the gas tax, and go back and you'll see consistently that Georgia's sort of in the middle of where current gas tax are, and we like to just make sure that you're aware kind of how Georgia gas tax is collected. 18.4 cents federal gas tax over on the left. That goes to Washington. Every state pays that. 7.5 cent excise tax is what we have per gallon. We have a 4% state prepaid sales, of which 1% of that goes to the general fund, roughly $180 million a year. The remainder comes back to the department for transportation purposes. And then we have local sales tax collected on gas. What I want to tell you, though, is that we have another thing coming up. As you know, the governor has to reset every 6 months. So he's fixing to have to reset the gas tax, that what's called the prepaid component of it. It's currently set at 8.8 cents a gallon. The 3%, he sets that every 6 months based on the previous 4 to 5 weeks. He'll be setting that for going into effect January 1st. As we all know, gas prices are down. So I'm not sure what he'll do. I think the current one is figured at $2.94 a gallon. Is what it's currently figured at, the 8.8 cents. If you were to look at what the current numbers are as you go by the pumps out here, it's probably in the 265 to 275 range around the state, which would mean that he would actually lower that number. So our forecast going into the 16 budget would be even less for gas tax. We've highlighted this before, kind of how the money comes in, where we come up with a 7.5 and 8.8. He'll reset that in the next, really probably around December 1st. We talked before to you about kind of our surrounding states and who we're competing with, and our effective gas tax that we come into Georgia that comes back to the Department of Transportation is the 34.7 cents. We've highlighted previously before just how our program stacks up to some of our other states.
Keith, on your last slide.
Yes, sir.
But that did not include, that doesn't include the local portion, right?
No, that's what comes back to transportation. Correct. Georgia DOT. That's the 18.4 federal plus the 16.3 that we currently get.
Does it include the 3%?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So that would be 18.4 federal, 7.5 cent per gallon plus the 8.8, the 8.8 cent that's currently at. Any questions on that? That's a bit confusing to some folks, I think, at times, but that's how much makes its way back to the Department of Transportation. We talked about the size of the system and what we're getting, and again, we talked about Florida. Florida is actually a little bit higher than that number in most categories, but what they're spending to us, and then how much we're actually tied to debt. We like to highlight that we have a tremendous amount of debt as part of our program that we have to pay each year. That comes right off the top, and then the size of the system that we look at and how much they're spending on capital projects. Spending per capita, we were somewhere between 48, 49, 50th, depending on who you talk to. Talking about the efficiency of our agency, though, we like to say, when you look at employees per capita, we're the 45th in the country, so we're not overstaffed. We don't have too many people. We're not a large organization that's not using our dollars very wisely. And then when you look at our system size per employee, we're the 37th in the country, lowest in the country. So again, when you look at the size of the system that we actually have per employee, we're very efficient in that area. So as an agency, I think we do a very good job. How do we compare to other systems, though, in terms of funding, too? We talk about Florida. I use Florida as a great example to the south. They have about 43,000 lane miles in that first column. We have 48,000. Most people don't realize we actually have more lane miles to maintain than Florida does. And yet, they're spending about $4.4 billion on capital. We're spending about $1.3 billion on capital. They're outspending us 4 to 1 on maintenance, what's called capital maintenance activities, what we spend on maintenance each year. So when we've talked to you before, there's all kinds of plans out there. There's all kinds of things that throw out big numbers all the time and everything. But you ask us to really focus on our needs. And we work with Toby Carr all the time in the governor's office about, making sure we have a strategic needs plan. And we focus on mobility, freight, and safety. And again, I like to highlight that we have had over 8 years in a row where we've reduced our fatalities in our state. We continue to drop that number. In fact, as of this morning, we're down almost 50 fatalities this year to date over last year. Those are real people coming. Wow.
That might mean your time.
Yeah, exactly. Is that it? I'm talking too much? I'm sorry. But again, those are areas we focus on. And currently, if you're very familiar with the program, we have a 4-year STIP program that includes the 4-year statewide transportation improvement program, as well as all the local metropolitan planning organizations' transportation improvement programs. When you roll that up, it adds up to about $8.63 billion. We, in a normal year, would let about $1.2 billion to construction. If you just look at what we have identified as unfunded needs, true needs, we talk about true needs. We're at the $29 billion just in the 20-year horizon. We looked at the GRIP program, the freight corridor, the rural mobility, and urban mobility, and I'll hit on these very quickly. These are the types of freight projects that we're saying are not currently funded, that are what we call the long-haul capacity needs around the state. And these are all over the state. These are not unique to Metro Atlanta, broken down by millions. Continuing on our freight corridors, interchanges, things that need to be done to make the freight move through just on interchanges alone, a little over $1 billion again. Rural mobility needs. We don't just have mobility and congestion needs in Metro Atlanta. We have them all over the state. These are some of the projects that we feel are very critical to being done that are currently not funded in our plans. This is, again, some more urban mobility. This would be the urban side. I mentioned rural. These are urban. Things that need to be done in the urban area, Metro and specifically the Metro Atlanta area. I guess we can talk about we did have one success, though, Representative Hamilton, I guess, right? One of the projects we removed from the list that was on here before was the State Route 400 needing to add a lane, and the delegation up there voted to do a property tax, right, to help us work with that, and we're working together to fund that. It's very exciting. So that $53 million from the 369 up there, I think should come off our list now. Capital projects. We looked at the GRIP program. The GRIP program is a big number still, but we just went through and said, what do we think needs to be done in the GRIP program? A little over $6.8 billion just remaining in just GRIP projects that need to be completed, the Governor's Road Improvement Program projects. Bridge maintenance. I think this is one that our local governments can certainly nod their heads to out here. We have over 6,651 bridges in our state. The average age is 44 years old, the oldest being 112. They average about 17,698 vehicles per day. Let's break it down. We have 1,622 on GDOT structures that need to be replaced over the next 20 years. That means we need to be replacing 89 structures per year just to have a 75-year cycle. 2,450 locally owned structures that need to be replaced over the next 20 years. These are local government needs at a cost of $4.8 billion. So they should be replacing we should be working with them to replace 107 structures per year. Currently, last year we did 60. So if you add the 107 and the 89 together, you can see that we have a huge deficiency just in bridges. This is something you're all going to start saying. I continue to preach this, and I'm going to try to put in some pictures for you today. But these numbers continue to be the ones that I think you're going to see the most from your citizens. Let me give you some background numbers. In 2002, over 90% of our system was rated a good or excellent condition. That would be the green and the blue. In 2006, we estimated that 63% of the state system would be in good and excellent condition. Or no, I'm sorry, in 2006, 63% of the system was in good or excellent position. So it had fallen from 2002 to 2006. In 2006, we used our own predictive models, and we estimated that at the current funding levels by 2013, only 59% of the system would be in good or excellent condition. Turns out that only 52% of the system is in good or excellent condition. So we are going in the wrong direction. To give you an idea what we mean by that, the left-hand corner is what we consider an excellent road. Right is in good condition. Fair and poor are the bottom left and the lower left. So this is the direction we are moving. This chart shows you the routes as we're trending down. This is not good or excellent. This is fair or better. So we're well under 80% of our system, and trailing the other direction is in fair or better condition. And I think this is one that really hits home with the Department of Transportation. Back in 1998, we did about 12% of our system annually, or roughly 2,200 centerline miles. We actually rehabilitated, either reconstructed or resurfaced. We've been trending down in the mid-2000s. You can see we got down to about the 4 to 5% range. Last year, we did just over 2%, as I've told you before, 2.4%. This year, we're looking at roughly 1% of our system will be actually rehabilitated. So all of you that continue to call and tell me that your road, you got State Route X or State Route Y that needs to be resurfaced, we agree with you. We actually have it on a 4 or 5 or 6, 7 year list. But when you're only doing 1 to 2% of the system, you're not going to be able to get very many rounds. These kind of break down what we call our roadway maintenance needs, what we need to be doing on state routes, interstate rehabilitation annually, overhead sign replacements that consistently have to be done on a 12 to 15 year cycle, striping and raised pavement markers. So you don't have to drive very far around our routes, particularly in Metro Atlanta, to see how far we are getting behind in striping. Just our striping needs we're getting further and further behind. We also have needs in intermodal. So we talk about 18.6 per year. The state matches what we need to match the $924 million in needs in both on the aviation side. Annual maintenance costs for airfields, you see about $30 million. We own a lot of short line railroads, as we've talked about previously. We need to be doing about $41.8 million a year just to keep up with the needs on the maintenance costs there. And then to give you an idea of what we spent in 2015, it's a little over $10 million for all of our programs. That's transit, rail, aviation, and ports. So in summary, we talk about our total needs. They're not in the STIP, just our capital needs. We're looking at around $29 billion is what we think our shortfall is. When you break it down on a yearly basis for just routine maintenance activities for roadway, we have about $6.4 billion over 20 years. We need about $320 million a year for roadway maintenance, $276 million a year just to kind of get back to bridge maintenance, basic bridge maintenance needs. That's about $5.5 billion over 20 years. And then, of course, on our aviation and airport and rail, we think we need to be investment about $70 million a year, about $1.4 billion over the 20 years. And we always close with, we do concur that transportation is the driving force behind a strong economy. They are definitely related. You can't separate the two. I think the ARC study this year again highlighted the fact that transportation is on a lot of people's minds, and it's critical to businesses in Georgia, our freight movement, and our ports activities. But we are falling further and further behind. And with that, I'll wrap it up.
Commissioner, make sure everybody understands, this is not any expansion or anything else.
No.
This is just to try to keep up with
Needs. We call it needs. Yeah. We're, as I told you, we're old enough to establish between our wants and our needs. These are what we call the needs.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Commissioner, thank you for that. And just want to repeat what he said, make sure. This is no expansion. This is just currently what's on the books right now. Nothing in addition to that. Correct?
That is, when you say not on the books, what do you mean?
Well, that it is on the books on your plan.
Some of these, yes, correct. Again, you have to be kind of careful because technically you can't have a project that's in the plan because you have to financially constrain your plan. So we've actually got projects that are not in the plan that we know are needed because of financial constraint issues, but on the books.
Two follow-up questions. One is on the bridges. You talked about the percentages of fair, good, excellent. Do y'all rate the bridges? I know you talked about how many you need to do, but do you have a rating right now?
Yes, sir. Every bridge has got an annual rating. They have to be reviewed.
So what has happened to those over that same time period?
Chairman Hamilton, you get close to a mic. I'm not sure they can hear it. Can you hear them back there in the back? Miss Emily, can you hear them? Good? Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, the aging bridges, obviously, they're aging out. As you can see, we're not keeping up. We're doing about 60 a year when we probably need to be doing 140 plus.
I know in Forsyth County, when we had our summit, one of the discussions was Lake Lanier as an example, opened in about 56. So if you look at from 56 to today, a lot of time has passed.
Right.
And many of the bridges up there, those bridges were built in 56 in that time frame. So we've got a huge situation brewing up there for the need for those bridges all around Lake Lanier.
Oh, certainly is. And asset management, when things all start aging out at the same time, from an asset management standpoint, definitely creates a problem.
The final question is, not that I think it will or will not happen, but there have obviously been discussions of the feds raising the excise tax on the federal level. Should that happen, then all that does is, well, if the money, depends on the money fills the gap or whether it's redirected, but it potentially just creates an even larger dependence on
let me make sure. Right now, to keep funding at its current level, that means no new increase to Georgia DOT. They would have to raise the federal gas tax 12 cents a gallon today to keep it at its current funding level, which would not generate. Yeah, it would not generate a single new dollar for Georgia. I mean, that's what they're filling it by borrowing and doing pension smoothing and all these other accounting tricks. But the delta is about 12 cents a gallon for them just to keep funding currently at our $1.2 billion level. That would.
One final thing, and I know Commissioner Tam is going to do a presentation on the bond a little bit later, but I just think it's worth saying that Georgia 400 from McFarland to Baldridge Marina, which is exit 12 up to exit 15, that's not even in the plan, but it was fair when we told people that if we didn't pass that bond, that it would be probably at least 15, 20, 25 years before it was widened, and then it would be very likely a managed lane.
Yes.
And because of the passage of that bond, we will actually see orange barrels and dirt being turned in 2015, correct?
That is the plan, yeah. And again, to give it's a great example of the public stepping up. So as we talked about, Georgia 400, a third lane in both directions on Georgia 400, all the way up to as far north as we could possibly go. Everybody, I mean, we recognize it's a responsibility of the state. That was part of your local delegation's concerns. That's a responsibility of the state, and we agree with that. We're not trying to shirk the responsibility, but ARC, the Atlanta Regional Commission, does the 20-year transportation plan for that region of which they sit in. And when they've looked at the amount of money they expect to get over 20 years, and then they drew a list of their projects, it was not included in the transportation plan. So no one would deny it was a need, but it was outside the financially constrained transportation plan. And so working with them, now that they're going to locally fund it, then they will go to the Atlanta Regional Commission and ask that project be put back into the transportation plan and move forward with local and a little bit of state funding to go along with that. But again, there are many projects that are not, I mean, everyone would agree is a good project that are not in the financially constrained plan.
Commissioner, I have a question for
Yes,
you.
sir.
Last week, I was up in Ringo, Georgia, and I got fuel at Costco for $2.46 a gallon. And I'm glad I can get cheaper fuel, and I love to see it coming down. And I know what it's doing to us at the state level.
Correct.
Do you have a prediction what the new tax rate will be if the governor indexes it in January? Do you know what the dollar amount would be?
Yes. So again, I don't know what the politics and everything behind it, but I think if you look at Department of Revenue's source today, they figured it last time and it hasn't been raised. Again, when it's gone up, we traditionally haven't raised it to track the northern number, but I think it's figured at $2.94 a gallon today, which is the 8.8 cents. So if it were figured at $2.60, $2.70 a gallon, I don't know what the number would be for the 5-week average coming up. So if that dropped at a penny or two, every penny it drops is about $60 million reduction.
We would be stuck in that time frame for 6 months.
6 months, correct.
So we wouldn't adjust it again until next July. Is that right?
That's traditionally what he does. Yeah, I mean, there are some provisions if, gas goes up or down drastic numbers, but not normally done. But about every 1 cent is roughly $60 million.
How many?
$60 million.
For 1 penny?
Yeah. About just the ballpark number, one cent in gas tax, about 60.
1 cent on the gas pump, or 1 cent?
1 cent of gas tax.
Okay, 1%?
Yeah. 1 cent.
Or 1 cent per gallon?
Yeah. 1 cent. So in other words, if he did the prepaid, it's currently 8.8. If he lowered it to 6.8, that'd be a 2-penny reduction. That'd be a $120 million drop in motor fuel, state motor fuel. If he did a 1 cent and dropped it to 7.8 cents a gallon, it'd be a $60 million reduction.
And so if we converted that...
Well, $60 million over 6 months would be half of that.
If this committee were to propose taking away the 7% rate, the sales tax, and just go to an excise tax, isn't it true you could predict more in the future what your revenues are going to be based on?
I think as long as you had that and you had an index, yes.
It wouldn't fluctuate up and down based on gas prices. It would
Correct.
be more on consumption.
Correct. That is true. And it would be much more predictable.
That's right.
Mr. Lindsay.
I think you've answered my first question. I just want to make sure that I understand. We have a 7.5 cent excise tax.
Yes, sir.
Every penny that goes up, if I understand, that we increase, that's one idea that's out there, would increase revenue for transportation purposes by $60 million.
I think that's a good ballpark number traditionally.
Okay. And if I understand correctly, the 1% diversion that we have from our sales tax to the general fund as opposed to transportation, that's at around $180 million.
So it's roughly 3 cents, which is $180 million. Yeah.
Just sort of, now there's been some talk about the fact that we have a very inefficient, and you may not be the best person to answer this, maybe somebody else. We have somewhat of an inefficient way of collecting on the gas tax, and that we collect it at the pump as opposed to at the rack. Do we have a figure, or do we have an estimate as to how much we would be able to collect in terms of efficiency if we collected it at the rack versus the pump? Do we have a figure on that?
Yes. So, and in fact, again, I'm probably not the expert on this, but I know enough to be dangerous. I think we actually we could a distributor, not the.
No, we collect it at wholesale level.
Right. I call it distributor.
Yeah,
as
we
opposed,
already do that.
The rack is one step up.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a rack, distributor, and then
That's why it's prepaid.
Correct.
Because it's paid by the wholesale.
changed that, I think, in 2005.
But Keith, didn't Alabama go to the rack and they saw about 11 or 12%?
You get an initial bump usually, and it's been anywhere from 6 to 10%. Most states have seen that the system. Then there's some challenges because of agriculture, exemptions and stuff. But I think the number is 5 to 10%. Most states that have gone back to the rack have seen some increase.
But we go back to the rack, how much do you think that we'll be able to?
I think the estimates would be 5 to 10%, possibly.
Probably not as much as it initially was when we first went to the wholesale level. I think their numbers was around $40 million, roughly, give or take a little bit, that we picked up by going to the wholesale level from the retail level.
Revenues have actually made some improvements, definitely.
So I don't know that you're going to pick up a whole lot anymore.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Commissioner, all your numbers and all your facts, were they strictly state roads, state bridges, or did it include the 85,000 miles of county roads?
When I did bridges, I broke it down to state routes and the needs in the local bridges, because under the federal program, they have some money that those bridges. We inventory and survey every bridge, and then we work with local governments, but they're struggling much like we are.
Yeah. Did you also include in your transportation dollars the number that local governments put into road maintenance and road expansion per year?
For which one are you talking about now?
This local government puts in about $1.3 billion a year into.
But they're putting it in typically their system, right? Their system. They have, as I showed that very first slide, they have a large system, a very large system, and they're certainly funding their system, but they're struggling too. Yes.
Thank you.
One follow-up question. You mentioned 120. I think I'm the only inside the perimeter delegate here. You mentioned 128 transit providers around the state. Do you know how many are in Metro Atlanta?
That are actually eligible for funds. You have. We mostly deal with the systems like the smaller jurisdictions, but obviously you've got Gwinnett, Cobb, and then Greta has a system.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you.
Mike Plant. Mike Plant is with the Atlanta Braves, and we're glad to have him here today. Can't talk to him about any trades or anything like that. Or tickets. We're just talking about transportation today. So, thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Tough act to follow with Keith. He's talking about the whole state, and obviously, I'm here to talk about a specific area of the Metro Atlanta. We made a little announcement about a year ago. We're not moving to Chattanooga. We're not moving to Jacksonville. So the good news is we're still the Atlanta Braves, and we're 12 short miles from downtown and Turner Field. In April 2017, we're going to start playing games, obviously in Cobb County. Excuse me 1 second. Technology's not, my nor trading Jason Hayward. Like you said, don't ask me any questions about that. Here we go. So, just first from a location standpoint, give you a little proximity. Our, as I said, 12 miles up the road from Turner Field, we are our new site. We own about 100 acres of land, and we're right at the junction of 75 and 285. This is maybe a map some of you have seen before. Its picture speaks 1,000 words, but it's we call it the heat map. In 2013, that represents a ticket purchaser. So you maybe purchased 1 ticket or 100 tickets. Each one of those dots represents a purchase. It's not season tickets, but what it does show is obviously a large concentration of our fan base resides outside the perimeter on the northern part of Atlanta. Obviously, we have fans all over the metro area, but a large concentration there. Difference for us than most professional sports teams around the country is over 20% of our fans come from outside the state of Georgia. It's one of the reasons why, very conservatively, we have a $105 million a year economic impact. You know, we're with this new facility with the new ballpark and the mixed-use development will employ over 5,000 people. So a lot of employees and obviously end up being consumers, end up being individuals that will, you know, drive and park and use transit to get to their jobs. But again, this map shows probably one of the reasons why we looked at moving closer to where the majority of our fans reside. Today at Turner Field, you know, we have a stadium that's got about 50,000 seats, and you can do about close to 5,000 to 7,000 standing room only seats. We're underserved by about 5,000 to 6,000 parking spaces in the current Turner Field site. We have about 2 main access points to get to Turner Field. And if you've come to games when we have over 40,000 people there, you struggle and you're challenged to find a place to park. And obviously there's a great deal of congestion with working with Keith and his team, obviously extensively. They do a great job of helping us with messaging, alternative ways to get on and off the freeway. But obviously, you know, as I said, there's a great deal of congestion in that corridor. The number one reason people don't come to more games year in and year out is traffic, lack of parking, and certainly transit. So it's something that doesn't go unnoticed in our organization, and it affects our business obviously a great deal, and it's a big impact and really a negative impact on the whole fan experience. If we look at our new site, and as I said, right now we have well over 100 acres of land that we've acquired and we own. The main 57-acre site is this site in here. It's where the majority of our focus is, and I'll show you a slide later where about the stadium and the mixed-use development. We're looking at acquiring, fortunately in this Cumberland area, there's 35,000 parking spaces. Vast majority of those are used for businesses. Vast majority of those are 9 to 5 type of employment opportunities. And lease parking is obviously our desire. It works all over the country. We don't want to build more parking if we don't have to, although part of our parking plan is that we will build 6,000 parking spaces for the mixed-use development in that main 57-acre site. But we'll spread out parking throughout a pretty good perimeter around the stadium, which will then allow people to come from all different directions. There's 17 different access points here versus 2 at Turner Field. So already that's a vast improvement in our opportunity going forward. You know, the big difference, obviously, and this was what our vision was starting in 2005 at Turner Field, is I've used the analogy of a golf course. We have a golf course right now. We don't have any home sites around it. If you're in the golf course business, that's really the kiss of death. You're not going to last long. And for us, there's 81 games a year. We'd like to play 10 more every year, so hopefully 91 games a year. But it's to create an environment that it's a sense of place, a destination, year-round, activated, come early, stay late, live there, work there, and that's what we're doing, obviously, at our new home in Cobb. This is an example of what the DRI, what's been approved by the ARC and DRI. It represents well in excess of 1.5 million square feet of mixed-use space. Phase 1 is about 1.1 million. We're doing it all at the same time. We control it all. We own it all. Our commitment to this is it's going to end up being about $850 million that our organization is putting into both the ballpark and the stadium. I think that number, as I said, from a $105 million economic impact currently is going to probably double because of this mixed-use development. And so, the impact, the positive impact is going to be great. Our investment in it's going to be long-term. It's a 30-year lease that we've signed. There's no other business in Cobb County obviously signed up for 30 years, and that is our commitment to not only Cobb County but the whole metro region, and to continue to make that positive impact. But this is a game changer, and it's what's different. I think for our organization and the Atlanta Braves is doing it all at the same time. There's great examples around the country of creating mixed-use development with the nucleus of sports facility, Denver and Cincinnati, San Diego, Houston. They've all obviously taken a sports facility as that conduit in some pretty challenged areas. And now if you look at them today, they've got great success stories and a lot of great economic impact. Just to give you a little bit of again, an example of some of the transportation projects and obviously working through GDOT and Cobb Transit, there's over $1 billion of current projects underway with the managed lanes project up 75 and 575, the Diamond diversion that's going in, the 41 expansion is another one. Again, that's our main site, 41, the Diamond diversion here, and the managed lanes up 75, and we think obviously that's all going to have a positive impact for us, but everyone that lives in that area. The DRI, getting that approval was extensive. A lot of work, a lot of money went into that, but obviously they've recommended some additional improvements that we'd obviously like to get in front of this group to again help the people that are living in this entire area. We're working with a lot of experts in parking and transit, and Kimberly Horn, the engineers, to make sure that we create a plan that is better egress, better ingress, not only to our games, but that site year-round. So, again, we recognize what we're good at most years. We're good at playing games and getting ourselves into postseason. We can forget about last September. That's a thing of the past, but we'll get back to where we need to be in our place of honor there. But again, this project is going to be a game changer, not only just for the metro area, but the entire state and what we call Braves country in the southeast. Again, event circulation, the main site, we're making some improvements obviously around this site on our own and working with Cobb, but we know that we have to continue to have better pedestrian access. Bikes are another one that we're working with the Cumberland CID on, because we think people that live in that area and that reside in that area will use bicycles and that to get in and out of the area. So it just gives you a little feel for we are working on the event circulation concept. And this is something that gives you a pretty good example of the fact that main 57-acre site, our stadium sits on 15 acres of it. The rest of it is all mixed-use development, hotel, office, 53,000 square foot multi-use entertainment center. The big heartbeat of it is this plaza area where you can get about 6,000 to 8,000 people, not only pre and post game, but year-round activities, and then all the residential and retail that all sits in here with parking that's baked into it. There's been a lot of work that's gone into this, global experts that have helped us master plan this whole site. This is all going in, we're in the permitting process now, and we've cleared the site. We're spending about $20 million a month right now. It's fast, it's furious, it's happening. As I said, we don't have a grace period. We play our first game there April 2017, and what we don't want to have is construction cranes all over this. So this is all being built at the same time. So that's our project, and again, continue to look forward to working with this, not only this committee, but with Keith and his whole team. We are going to have an impact. I tell people all the time, look, newsflash for you, there's traffic in Atlanta, but we are working with a lot of people, a lot of companies that provide a great deal of expertise. We think that the impact's going to be positive. We don't play 365 days a year. We work with the right team of experts. Technology is going to help us communicate better as far as road access and congestion and where to park, right down to the exact numbers of spaces available for games. We know we'll have enough parking available. We are going to have a mass transit plan as well and be advocates of that. But again, there's always things that, as we saw Keith's list, it's pretty extensive, little ways to continue to work together to improve what happens around that site for the long term. So that's my report. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions by the committee? Mike, let me say that we appreciate everything that y'all done. Y'all been great to work with and all, and doing an outstanding job. Y'all taking a few lumps in here and there. You got, but just keep up the good work. I mean, we're used to that kind of stuff every day.
I know you are.
So keep your head up and keep going on. We appreciate the fact what y'all do and everything you're doing here for the state of Georgia and Atlanta Braves. We're still behind you.
Thank you.
Support you.
we think, once again, this is a game changer, and it's it goes well beyond 2017. It's generational. It's a new legacy for that whole area. So, and yeah, we have thick skin through this, and we're gonna do what we said we're gonna do. So that's what we're gonna deliver. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you. You have a question? Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you. Thank you so much. All right. Let's see, Mr. Brian Tam. Yeah. It's amazing, right? Yeah. You can go ahead, Mr. Brown, when you get ready. Oh, I guess when he gets ready. Get you ready. I'm sorry.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Brian Tam. I'm a commissioner in Forsyth County. I'm chairman of the Forsyth County Transportation Committee. I was first elected to office in Forsyth County as a commissioner in 2004. Our population at that time was 140,000 people. At the end of this year, we expect we'll have 195,000 people. So 55,000 people over a period of about 10 years. I'm here today to talk to you about the Forsyth County Transportation Bond, which passed just a few weeks ago by a margin of 63%. And I'd like to say at the outset, this was a team and group effort. Our Representative Hamilton helped pave the way for this, as well as our Senator Gooch, some other members of our delegation, and Rudy Bowen is our DOT representative. We had several meetings. I think they might have got sick of us actually down at GDOT with Keith Golden, Russell McMurray, and Toby Carr. But here's why we felt like we need to do this. I was the county's representative for the T-SPLOST committee back in 2011. Obviously, it did not pass. I remember that day still knowing that the projects needed to be done. So the T-SPLOST not passing was one reason. The county SPLOST projects, we had fallen behind because of the recession, and we wanted to speed up the timeline of the GDOT projects. As was mentioned earlier, Georgia 400 being widened was a decade or so out, and quite frankly, that was really the passionate issue on our bond that our citizens were just embraced wholly when they heard about the bond. They're like, where can I send a check? You know, anything I can do to get off of Georgia 400 at a reasonable time coming home or trying to get to work. So those are the reasons why. What this bond is up to $200 million in general obligation bond to finance the transportation projects, $81 million of county money going to help leverage state and federal funding of $93 million, and then $119 million proposed for our county projects. I'd like to break it down into really 4 or 5 components of what the bond makeup was. As you can see here at the top, and I did pass out some handouts, first segment is the proposed GDOT partnership projects. There's, as you see, Georgia 400, the county ponying up $53 million, and the state at least $10 million, and that if you're familiar with the area, we'll go from exit 12, which is McFarland, to at least exit 15, Baldridge Marina Road. Also State Route 371, which is Post Road in Forsyth County. The Innovative Flow intersection at 369 and Georgia 400. Some widening on 369 from Highway 9 to 372. And also, very important to us from an economic development standpoint, is the McGinnis-Ferry interchange at Georgia 400, which is just south of McFarland, north of Windward, right at the county line. I can tell you, as being a commissioner as long as I have in Forsyth County, we're still permitting houses about 2,500 a year. This year, 2,500 last year, single-family houses. In 2006, we permitted around 7,000 single-family homes. Our demand for residential housing is coming back. I'm convinced that if we didn't do something to put in some infrastructure that was going to attract economic development, commercial development, that we were going to have yet another area of our county that was going to turn to residential development. Yes, sir, Mr. Beach.
Isn't there a proposed mixed-use development at McGinnis-Ferry and 400?
Yes, thank you very much. We have a development agreement with the Taubman Group, which is a large outdoor mall group that we entered into a development agreement in 2006. We have sewer reserved. We have 4-lane roads on the ground down there, and we've probably talked more with Taubman over the past 90 days than we have in the past 3 years. They actually contributed $200,000 to the engineering study for the interchange. So we're very excited if we can get this interchange. Those of you that are familiar with the Georgia 400 corridor might remember when the Mansell exit went in. Didn't go in right at the same time as some of the others, and has created quite a bit of economic development there in Fulton County. We hope that it will do the same thing for Forsyth County, that same concept. So moving on down, we only have 2 new county roads. It's actually one road that is in 2 segments. It's Ronald Reagan Boulevard. And again, that goes right through the McGinnis-Ferry interchange area, right through the economic development project that Mr. Beach asked about. This, we plan, will serve as an extension of North Point Parkway and run parallel to Georgia 400. And again, critical to economic development in the area. The major road widening projects are our SPLOST projects that were first voted on by the voters in 2003. Some $63 million worth of roads that it's just gridlock in South Forsyth County. And we need to get these roads going. Pilgrim Mill Road, we already own the interchange, the Union Hill Road, we own the right-of-way. This funding will help put the bridge in over Georgia 400 and get that road rolling down in that area. Last component would be just traffic safety improvements, some intersection improvements, things that are designed to just help us continue to improve the way our traffic flows. All in all, up to $200 million that the voters approved in this bond. Little background of when this all came about. After the T-SPLOS failed in 2012, we did some soul searching, and we did have a transportation committee. However, it wasn't very active, and we decided to revamp it and get some members on there that were going to be proactive about meeting with our state officials and utilizing our resources. So we met six times over 7 months in 2014. We worked closely, as I said, with GDOT. We had at least a meeting every other month. 2013, 2014, this was on the agenda, the Board of Commissioners meetings at least 7 times. Once we got our letter from GDOT committing, that would be in late July of this year, we started putting together our project list. The Board of Commissioners voted 5-0 for the project list that was finalized September 23rd, 2014. We went in partnerships with our Chamber of Commerce and held a transportation summit on October the 8th, fielded a number of questions, and really laid it out there for our citizens to vet through. We placed it on the ballot, obviously, November 4th. And here are you have some of the information in front of you that we circulated to the citizens that the county and the Chamber of Commerce put together. The Chamber of Commerce efforts, they were helpful to us helping to prepare the Transportation Summit. They were a sponsor. You can see here some of the, again, the heart and soul of our bond, Georgia 400. In addition, Ronald Reagan, as I mentioned before, a number of the projects. So we wanted to get creative also with our citizens as far as getting their buy-in to fund this. So as you see here, it's a $200 million bond. I'll just go to the far right. On a $350,000 house, the payments are $175 a month. But what we did is we passed a resolution of the Board of Commissioners that we would dedicate $100 million of our SPLOST 8, which will come up for a vote by 2019, towards the repayment of the bond. So as you can see here, by doing so, on a $350,000 house, that takes that $175 annual payment down to under $100. Well received by the citizens of the county, knowing that this was going to be funded in part by sales tax. As a result, the bond passed, as I said, 63%. And moving forward, we continue to have talks with our state officials, Representative Hamilton, Rudy Bowen, Senator Gooch, and we are looking forward to continuing to work together. In closing, I would just say that we just couldn't wait in Forsyth County, adding the number of people that we were adding with the demand that we have for people who want to come live there. And we feel fortunate that GDOT was receptive to our plan and that they helped tweak it, and that we have an agreement in place to move forward. So that concludes my presentation. If anyone has any questions.
Questions from the committee? I'll say, no, you don't get to ask any. This is your hometown. Y'all, no, just hold on quick. But I will say, from my standpoint and position that I serve, we actually, I want to thank y'all for your leadership and what you've done and being proactive and all. We do appreciate that. Anytime we can get that kind of collaborative effort, we do appreciate it. We thank you for standing up for that tough issue and taking that lead, as well as Chairman Hamilton, Chairman Gooch here as well. So we want to thank you for that. Chairman Hamilton.
Yeah, this is a statement that I want to make sure everybody is aware of on this, and I think there's a great lesson, or many great lessons to be learned in this, and I'm not sure I know all the lessons yet, but we're trying to determine. And here's 3 facts that I think are very important as we look at this. First, it's fair to say that Forsyth County is either the or one of the most conservative voting counties in the state, and I say that not to make it a partisan issue, but from a taxing and size of government and those type of things, it's a very important thing. Secondly, not only he didn't tell the whole story, but not only did T-SPLOS fail, it failed big. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I want to say it was 25-75, something like that. So you're taking the most conservative voting county in the state, a T-SPLOS that had great projects, and people would say they were great projects. Some of these same projects failed miserably. So then the question begs to ask, how did this then, a bond, which is a property tax increase, how did this pass 2-1? And this committee has indulged me, because every meeting we've had, I've talked about this leading up to this, and I just think there's a real message in there, especially to some of my colleagues, to hear that the citizens of Georgia are not against raising taxes if they're done in the right way and used for the right thing, and we have to educate them to do that. And so it requires us to really do our homework to figure out. So what I want to do is I want to learn from this and say, how did we do this? And more importantly, as we look at funding needs around the state, how can we find a way to present it to our colleagues in the House and the Senate, which are going to have to go along with it, or would need that, the governor's office, everybody, so that we would feel comfortable in going back to our constituents and saying, this is what we need to do. And that's my goal, and I want to do this. I really want to learn from this, and I appreciate you allowing me to say that. And I think the final comment on that is, many of you heard me talk about, that's why I think part of our funding initiative needs to include a portion of new revenue for those, and I call it for those that help themselves. What he didn't mention was this is on top of, simultaneously, a $40 to $45 million project through a CID, so we've already convincing property owners to pay additional taxes for the purpose of this CID. He also failed to mention that that project, after 2 Georgia State studies, is estimated to be $1 billion in tax base and create 9,000 jobs. And I think that's why the business community supported it. So I think that it beholds it to us to find out the justifications for whatever we do so that we can get the buy-in. And thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to go back and just state that, in addition to working with GDOT and our state representatives, the interchange that I mentioned is at the county line, and we will be working with our friends in Fulton County as well, particularly on the McGinnis Ferry Road widening project.
If I may, and Mark or you, or for that matter, our chairman, our DOT commissioner, were these projects, were they already on a state list that were just unfunded?
Well,
I was trying to figure out.
Sure.
Because I'd love to see great, let me tell you where I'm coming from. I'd love to see greater coordination between the state and the local, where you've got a project that everybody agrees would be great for that particular area, but the state just doesn't have the money right now. But obviously, I'd like to have some oversight by the state to say, no, this is a project that's really important. So I'd like to know just sort of how that coordination took place.
Right. Initially, we had a number of conversations with the state about a bond, and the bond was going to try to take on our major road widening projects, all of which here, totaling about $65 million, were passed already in SPLOST, going back as far as 2003. However, there needed to be something that people were going to get passionate about if they were going to tax themselves. And a lot of these roads, in fact, all of these roads, are located in the south part of the county, mostly in the southeast side. So it didn't take long for us to say, as a committee, and try to talk with GDOT about it, that we needed something that everybody was going to grab a hold of. And we had those conversations, and we realized that, you know, the managed lane program was what was slated for Georgia 400, and, you know, got to hand it to you, Commissioner. I mean, we worked through it, and they were willing to get on board and allow us to contribute to the widening of Georgia 400 that would, you know, expedite the project. So the county is going to pay a significant amount of money, but the citizens of the county feel that it's well worth it. This was the project that made them vote for our bond, which was widening Georgia 400. I hope that answers your question.
Congratulations, Commissioner. I'm very proud of what you've done.
Thank you.
That's outstanding. Did you make the obligation to the citizens, or did you put it on the referendum itself, the project list? I know we've had great success with SPLOST over the years, as you're aware.
Right.
Because we put the list
Yes.
out there. Is that the commitment that you're going to do 1, 2, 3, or is it?
Yes, we made a commitment to this project list. We finalized it on September 23rd of this year and started publicizing it to the public, and then right afterwards agreed to pay back $100 million out of SPLOST. Yes. So this was the project list that the Board of Commissioners finalized and voted on 5-0. And the public was glad to see us united on the project list. I hope that answers your question.
It was a project list on the bond.
Okay.
What's your question?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for helping me to get down Georgia 400 faster from Atlanta. I live 2 counties up from me, as you know. Tell us about your messaging. Obviously, it was successful, but how did you deal with the opposition to the referendum? Because I know there's opposition to everything you tried.
That's right. There was opposition that this was going to promote more growth. There was opposition that these were state roads. Why does the county have to do the state roads? There were people that saying you're just doing the people in Dawson County and Lumpkin County a favor by putting these roads in. And look, I would say the same thing over and over and over again. There's enough responsibility to go around. There's enough responsibility. There's no blame to go around to anybody. There's enough responsibility to go around. And we can be proactive and pony up. You know, in Forsyth County, the average price of a house in my district is $450,000. That's the average price of a house. And about 2/3 of them use Georgia 400 every day to go down and work in Atlanta or Windward or anywhere south of Forsyth County. So they're going to tax themselves $150 to get home 20 or 30 minutes earlier every day. What's the value on that to a working person with a family wanting to get home? It's strong. I mean, the overwhelming support for this when we were starting to talk about Georgia 400. The list is you know, lengthy with some of our projects that we wanted to take care of for our SPLOST obligations, but all they heard, most of them, was Georgia 400. That's what they heard first and foremost. Then they heard 369. Then they heard Post Road, and they heard Ronald Reagan and the interchange. But primarily they heard Georgia 400 because as you come north on Georgia 400 and you hit the McFarland Road, it goes from 4 lanes to 3 lanes to 2 lanes coming north, and it just stops. It was stopped yesterday at 3:45.
One last quick
Yes.
question, quick answer. If this committee proposes something significant next year and we pass it, and it increases people's taxes or user fees on public roads in Georgia, Forsyth County citizens are going to have to pay for that as well.
Understand?
How do you think they'll respond to that?
Well, the bond is structured in such a way where it's up to $200 million. You know, if a better idea comes out and gets worked out, if you all tell me you're going to do Georgia 400 and Forsyth County doesn't have to participate, then we just won't tax our citizens. It's up to $200 million. So we're comfortable that if something, if something proactive comes our way, then we'll yield to the state of Georgia.
This is, well, and this is directed just as much to you, Mr. Chairman, and you, Mr. Chairman, as well as everyone else. I've sat next to this gentleman for 7 meetings now, listening to him brag about Forsyth County. What do you think that we need to be doing to encourage this sort of cooperation between local government and the state DOT to be able to fast forward projects in particular areas? Is there legislative changes that we need to be recommending out of this committee to help facilitate and encourage that? That's sort of a question.
I think we're going to have a good opportunity to discuss that here in the next.
I know. I'm just sort of.
And I agree. I mean, we do. We need to encourage more of that cooperation and working together.
Yeah.
Quick.
Commissioner, you indicated, I think I heard you just say, or mention that if the state were to pass something that was to help you out, that you had the discretion.
Well, the bond language is
Can you
written.
explain that a little bit?
Sure, the bond language is written for we can borrow up to $200 million. We haven't borrowed anything yet. We haven't bonded anything. So, as you look here, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Georgia 400 is going to be a GDOT project. So, we're going to pay GDOT. If they don't give us a bill, that'd be fine with us. But yes, we can borrow up to $200 million.
Thank you so much. We appreciate y'all.
Thank you for having me today. Good to see you.
All right, we're going to break for 30 minutes for lunch. We've got a group of high school students down there to serve the committee and to meet with us and talk with us for a few minutes. So I don't want to keep them waiting. I want to make sure we indulge them. And as the speaker said, you need to spend some money in Blue Ridge. So I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to go spend a few dollars for lunch in Blue Ridge. We'll be back here at roughly 12:30 to get started up so we can get finished. Go ahead and get started. Most of the committee members are back. As soon as Chairman Burns gets up here and gets set down, we'll get started. Chairman Burns.
Is there a problem with Chairman Burns?
Not mentioning any names, but John Burns, JB.
Yes, sir.
I don't know.
Pardon me, Chairman.
All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. A lot of us have to drive over back to Rome from here tonight. So Rich Giuliani is here from ARPA, and he's got a presentation. It's going to be interesting tonight. We actually saw this in Washington. Chairman Gooch and I were up there for an event, and it's a very good presentation, so I encourage you to pay attention and listen to what he has to say. So when they get you ready, you can take it away.
Chairman, thanks very much. A pleasure for me to be with all of you today. I'll give you background on ARPA in a second, but want to thank all of you and all the members of the group for the time you're spending on this important issue, and thanks to our hosts here, the speaker, and everyone else. I think I can follow up on the previous three presentations to some degree or another. Certainly some of the things the Commissioner mentioned I'm going to elaborate on, and I'm also going to talk about some of the state and local funding measures, similar to what you heard about from Forsyth a few minutes ago. But my favorite of the three was the Braves, because my full biography includes the fact that I've attended games at all 30 Major League stadiums in my life. So this is the next one that's coming, and as soon as it opens, my friends and I are going to be there, I can assure you. We will be, and I say that as a Washington National season ticket holder, but we'll be here. We will put money into the economy here. So let me give you just a minute of background on who we are. ARPA was formed in 1902. The idea back then was to support the building of a capital connecting highway system, so a system of paved roads to connect all 50 state capitals with one another, or less than 50 at that time, and connecting those capitals with the U.S. Capitol in D.C., which at the time was a pretty revolutionary idea, and more or less became the interstate system 50-some years later when it was authorized. We are affiliated with the Georgia Highway Contractors. They are one of our oldest affiliations going back to the 1930s. And we work with the Georgia Transportation Alliance as well, and other groups, similar groups around the country. I normally spend a lot of time talking about the federal situation. I'll make some references to that, but we do want to emphasize in this presentation what's been going on in other states and localities to kind of give you some context for what has been happening. So here are the areas that I'm going to cover in the next few minutes. And I will refer to two documents, actually three documents, but two multi-page documents that you have and that we have available to anybody who's interested. One summarizes the recent ballot referenda around the country in the general election of a couple of weeks ago. And the other one is our monthly roundup of transportation activities, funding activities in the different states, which includes legislative activities as well. And also the PowerPoint, there's going to be a lot of data and maps and so forth in here, which I don't expect you to be able to follow completely as we go through it, but and all the details, but we'll have this available for you too, so you can take a closer look at that. So we're going to talk about the referenda. We're going to talk about the bipartisanship of transportation, which continues, the different funding measures at different levels of government, and motor fuels tax or sales tax increases that have taken place in the last several years, and then again the importance of the federal program. So here's our first map, which takes a look at what occurred this year. Now this includes the primaries. There were various referenda on the ballot earlier in 2014. The report that you have just covers the general election, but this goes all the way back through the calendar year of 2014. So you can see that there were a lot of different referenda. There were some that were just statewide. You had a mix in a number of states where you had state and local ballot, or county local as well. So there was a lot of activity going on, similar to what you heard about a few minutes ago. This is, again, the total rack up for 2014 throughout the year. So there were a total of 220 measures on the ballots. You can see a little bit about specifically what they were about. 79% of them were successful, $17 billion total in terms of funding approved for transportation. Yes, sir.
Just kind of interesting how 94% of the bonds and only 56% of the sales tax. Do you have any thoughts or rationale on that?
I think it's been pretty consistently that way, I suppose, because when you are talking about a tax, while most of them have been successful, there can be a little bit more spirited debate about that in terms of bonding. There just seems to be more of a willingness to go in that direction. Now we can, of course, talk about which is better public policy and so forth, but that seems to be that seems to be pretty consistent. That's been kind of the consistent pattern there. And again, we can get into some more details and provide you some more data on that if you'd like, if you're interested in it. You can certainly take a look at it. This is the ballot referenda rate of approval over the years going back to 2004, and the red bar at the end there is the overall average, so it's 73%. These are all the different types. So you can see 79%, which is the second last on the right there. That's from 2014. That was above average, but it's always been strong support, maybe down to the 60s in some years, but 70s and 80s many times. So and you know, I want to refer back to what Chairman Hamilton was talking about earlier this morning, and the fact is that these can be successful, particularly if you show the voters a connection between what you want them to pay and what they're going to get for it. I think that's what the successful measures have in common, that the campaigns are very compelling. Now, it doesn't always work, but many times it does. In the overwhelming majority of cases, it does. So, as we say, the voters get it. They see a close connection there if it's presented correctly. If you go back to 2000, you see 645 initiatives, and you see 75% of them passing. If you go all the way back a few years more, and again, you can see some of the averages there, the highest ones being property tax and extensions and bond referenda and so forth. So basically the same pattern that we talked about a minute ago. Now this is an interesting few facts here that some of my colleagues came up with, as we have a group of economists and researchers at ARTBA that developed this information. And they took a look at 140 counties that had transportation initiatives over a 9-year period. And they identified 126 of them as having political affiliations that were predominantly one or the other. Obviously, in the middle, you have so-called swing counties that kind of go back and forth. But interestingly enough, in so-called Republican counties, and it was about equal, basically 47, close to equal Republican and Democratic counties, I suppose. Republican counties, 47 measures of 81% were approved, so that's actually a higher rate of success than in prominently Democratic counties, which was 73%. Still a very high rate of approval. And again, you can look through the numbers in a little bit more detail and kind of pick out some of the different factoids. But I think this supports the notion that it is a bipartisan issue, and that the voters, and again, as you heard in the particular presentation about Forsyth earlier in the comments that were made, it can be successful even in very conservative counties as well. Now these refer to legislative initiatives since 1993, legislative initiatives along the lines of what you're considering and what you're planning to work on here. So this gives you an idea of the ones that have been successful. Now these come in all shapes and sizes and forms. We'll get into a little bit about what these have meant, but just to give you an idea of what has been going on in the states in those years. And then this one talks about basically increases in motor fuel or gasoline sales tax for transportation since '97. Now Georgia is highlighted because you do have the 4%, and it is adjusted. You were talking about that earlier, so on occasion it's been adjusted upward, and we do have some states like Georgia that are included in this. As you'll see, it's tied to basically a form of indexing. But again, there are different variations on this, but it shows you what has occurred in the last 17 years. The darker purple states passed gas tax increases of some sort or another over those years. And then these are states where they approved bond. Again, these are statewide, where they approved bond ballot measures since 1997. So there's been a fair amount of activity there. There are a few states where they have done this multiple times. I know Rhode Island being one of them. And then this map looks at sort of various and sundry other mechanisms that have been passed. This includes so-called lock boxes or constitutional amendments and so forth. We've had a few of those. We just had two of them that were successful on the ballot earlier this month in Wisconsin and Maryland. So basically setting aside transportation funding, passing some sort of a prohibition to using those funds for non-transportation purposes, so forth and so on. There's another one in Texas which is worth noting because that was a very active campaign down there, and that involved transferring $1.2 billion from the state's rainy day general fund to the transportation fund for road improvements and for light rail. So that was there was a lot happening there and a lot going on with that campaign. That was a referendum as well, and it was successful a couple of weeks ago. Here's a look at when this has been done legislatively with gas tax increases, the political parties of the governors. So you can see you have both parties represented. You actually have a fair number of red states up there representing Republican governors who by and large signed these increases into law at various times. Now these aren't all the same governors we have now. This goes back several years. But you'll see again there's some bipartisanship there. And then when you add in the legislatures and you take a look at which party was controlling the legislatures, again, it's not a monochromatic map one way or the other. You see a lot of different states, some where the Democrats controlled all three, some where the Republicans controlled all three, a number of them where there was split control among the House, Senate, and the governorship. So obviously all of these folks were working productively on increasing funds for transportation and their gas tax in those particular years. So again, a lot of bipartisanship going on there. 13, just going back to a point from a minute ago, 13 state gas tax increases were passed by states with a Republican majority in both houses and a Republican governor. 12 of the 13 governors who sought re-election after passing those were re-elected. 9 of them were Republicans. The one exception was Governor Corbett in Pennsylvania, who was defeated a couple of weeks ago. I think if you talk to people up there, they would tell you that the transportation bill that they passed a year ago was not the driving force for his defeat. It got into a number of other issues. Also, in talking to the gentleman who runs our chapter up there, he said politically, given that they passed a major funding bill which involved a gas tax increase a year ago, a form of a gas tax increase, that there were very few supporters of that bill defeated. Actually, in the general election, there was only one, and again, it was likely attributable to a variety of issues, not just his support for this particular bill. And I think there was somebody in a primary who was beaten earlier in the year, but again, it was that was not the primary issue, so the most important issue in the primary. So a couple of important points there about what has happened electorally with these folks. Here again is a list of a map of legislative initiatives from last year and how they fared. Some of them not approved, some of them did. You can see there's kind of a mix there. In the states where they were not approved, I can tell you that in most cases they came back this year, and we're revisiting a number of those as well. What are the trends? Well, the TIAC, TIAC is Transportation Investment Advocacy Center, which is part of ARTPA, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. But when we looked at last year, and there was a lot of activity legislatively in 2013, so that included Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Wyoming, among others. Again, some red states, some blue states in there, so-called. But you did have strong leadership from the governor in many of those cases, or strong support. There was bipartisan support. Again, even in red states, even in blue states, you needed some support on both sides of the aisle, and that was the case. There was concern about being able to match the federal investment in many of these states. That was one of the rationales for moving forward on state funding. And what we would say is a lot of national momentum for doing this. There was also a lot of talk, and I know that you've considered this issue, of adjusting rates or keeping up with inflation. When you have a flat rate gas tax like on the federal level, what we're dealing with, 18.4 cents, 24.4 cents a gallon for diesel, hasn't been changed since 1993. So the buying power on the federal level is perhaps about half or a little bit more than half of what it was 21 years ago. You can make the same kind of comparisons on the state level as well. So there's a lot of concern about that and trying to get back to that. And as the commissioner said, we would need 12 cents and hope to advocate for 12 cents, certainly on the federal level, but that just takes us up basically to where we are right now. And that recoups the lost buying power from the last 21 years. That's the main point. Here we look at legislative initiatives from this year, and this gets into one of the documents there, our monthly report. If a bill is introduced, it makes it onto this map. So you did have one bill in Georgia here earlier this year that I understand was tabled at the time, but these vary in terms of significance and viability and so forth. But just to give you a sense of where some of the legislation has been moving and where it's been introduced around the country. Again, all shapes and sizes. Scope is different for all these pieces of legislation. Some very ambitious and others kind of smaller in scale. But it'll give you a sense there. I also gave you the map, which we developed at ARTPA based on the federal numbers, which does show the importance of the federal program. And on average, over 10 years recently, about 52% of the state DOT capital outlays around the country have originated with the federal program. And in Georgia, the number has been higher. It's been 62%. You had a discussion about that earlier. And I think our proposition to you would be that the federal program is as important as the states. They're both very important. If we are able to make progress on the federal program, it still means that the state funding is critical and the work that you're doing is very important, and vice versa. One is not necessarily a substitute for the other. So we would encourage you, as you're working through these issues and leading on these issues, to also push your congressional delegation similarly so that we can make some progress on the federal level. Just a couple of other points here, some things that to look at. We analyze the state DOTs nationally, and their use of state motor fuel tax receipts. Now again, some of this is going to be apples and oranges because they don't all devote all of their state motor fuel tax receipts to transportation. But as you can see, nationally there's about 22% of that used for capital outlay maintenance and administration. Local roads are a chunk of that, and then you have debt service, non-highway transit. Law enforcement and safety is one that's fairly common around the country. So you see some of those different uses, and again, that underscores the partnership on the federal level as well, because that is in addition to that 22% used for capital improvements. Well, here's yes, sir.
Do you know where Georgia stands? We've discussed a fair amount in this committee over the last few months. The diversion of fuel taxes to non-transportation purposes. Do you know where Georgia stands vis-a-vis other states? Or are we diverting a larger percentage than most other states?
I would ask, I can get in touch with my colleague and see if we can get more micro data on that to show you.
I appreciate it.
I don't have it offhand, but we can certainly share the research with you on that. You can take a look at it. Okay. Well, here's where all this comes from, and it is our TAC, as we call it. There's a website that I'll show you later, transportationinvestment.org, that you're welcome to visit. And we also held a workshop on state funding, which your two distinguished chairmen attended with a group last July, and we have another one coming up next July where we talked about successful and unsuccessful transportation initiatives around the country to try to share information. We had some very detailed presentations on what happened in Pennsylvania and Virginia last year. We also had Seth talking about what had happened here in 2012 and just trying to share information of all sorts with transportation advocates around the country. And that's the originator of the two documents that you see right there. We have always been at ARTBA a federally oriented organization, but we do have chapters like the Georgia Highway Contractors around the country, and it became a priority for us a few years ago to try to develop and share this sort of information on the state and local level with our chapters and with other advocates, certainly with leaders like yourselves, so that you would have more information about what's happening around the country with your colleagues. So we have a blog that you can subscribe to, and you can get more information there. We have campaign case studies from particular states, so we'll have the legislation. If it was a referendum or if there were advertisements or polling done associated with that, we've gathered as much up of that as we can. And again, different resources, the folks who manage the different campaigns and so forth, we have that available to you. The funding mechanisms, again, going state by state, and also some nationwide trends there as well. So that's all available to you. So again, we still think and continue to believe it's a strong bipartisan issue, that politically it can be a winner. It's not a losing issue, it's a winning issue, particularly if it's portrayed the right way. We thank you for your leadership and certainly want to help in any way we can, along with our partner groups in Georgia.
All right. Rich, thank you so much. Anybody got any questions? I mean, this is a great presentation that Chairman Gooch and I got to see in Washington, like you said, back in July. They have a lot of research and data and all. They do a great job. We thank you for that. Appreciate you coming today.
Thank you.
All right, Miss Jan. Is she here? Jan Hackett? All right.
She's the chamber.
Yeah.
County chamber.
Didn't see it.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to get a copy of...
You got that?
Is it already?
Yes. Okay. Right there. Should have gotten a copy today. They laid them out on everybody's desk.
It's not exactly the same presentation.
There's two different ones. All right. So with that, let's go on to Miss Danielle Elkins. Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Danielle Elkins. I'm with CH2M Hill. I'm our Government Affairs Director based here in Georgia. And I'm kind of bringing a new concept into this. There's been a little bit of discussion, I know, in some of your past meetings about VMT and road user charges. hopefully I can answer some of your questions. Our firm was involved in the Oregon pilot study, which I think some of you have seen so far, so hopefully I can answer some of your questions about that and explain more in depth what a road user charge program looks like. So just going to talk about potential solutions. A lot of what's already been discussed here. I won't go too much into that. Do an overview of road user charge systems, show how you can do mileage measurements, the different options, the user choices, which is really important for that privacy concern. Talk about some of those misconceptions, and then look at how to be successful in road user charge and unlocking the potential there, what's going on in other states for road user charge, and then what would be a path forward to trying something like that in the state of Georgia. So other things that have been discussed so far by a lot of other folks and all the data that's been out there, you can raise the gas tax, you can look at other types of sales tax, income tax increases, or putting extra taxes on things like tires, vehicles, things that go with your annual registration renewal. The difficulty with that is that it's a lot of times difficult, unpopular. It's a short-term fix. A lot of the focus I know for you guys is what's the long-term solution for the state of Georgia. So some of these don't necessarily fix the long-term issue, the changing in demographics, the less VMT with younger people driving less, taking transit more. You don't have quite the sustainable transportation funding source that you would like. It's also an increase tax in fee. I have a random phone on the board. Someone lost their phone. It's a good way to find your phone.
That's scary.
It's a wake up after lunch.
Carry that outside real quick.
Another big issue that VMT can potentially fix is the direct linkage between payers and users. So you're paying directly by the miles that you're paying. So what I'm really going to focus on in this presentation, though, is a revenue based on the miles that are actually traveled by the individuals in the state. So it's a direct relationship between usage and the taxes and fees that are being paid. It captures those who now are paying little or no gas tax, so the increase in electric vehicles, hybrids. And then the really important area that I'll focus on is privacy and choice for the individuals that participate in the program. So why consider a road user charge? It's the most equitable and efficient link between users and payers. You're paying for the miles that you are traveling, the wear that you are putting on the roads within the state. It's also a more reliable funding source that will help you to maintain your overall system. You don't have to worry about the flows of increase of gas tax and sales tax that changes. And this is where you kind of get into your field of options, where there's a broad opportunity for policy changes, but you do as much as you're comfortable with and what works for the state, so you fit it towards what you need. So, if you wanted to look at off-peak travel incentives with all the truck traffic that goes through the state of Georgia, looking at controlling emissions, doing anything with social equity, giving incentives for rural drivers that are driving more, a lot of different options, but you decide what you're comfortable with within the state. And then this is really the important part to emphasize. This is a long-term policy shift. This is after, if you have implemented a short-term solution for right now, this is 5 years out. So it's going to take at least 2 years to start implementing a program and pilot studying a program like this. So this is something that's going to fix long-term funding solution. So this is I think the most kind of important graphic of understanding road user charges. There is a wide range of how you can implement this, and the really great part, which I think what they did in the Oregon study, is that they gave the users the choice of how far they're going to go. So from the far left-hand side, you can do a flat fee. The way they did it for Oregon was a 3-month fee, which ended up being $45 a month, I think, for 3,000 miles anticipated a month. So for that individual, they're not reporting the actual miles that they're driving. They're just paying a flat fee, and that's it. The next...
On either the flat fee or any of these, because there's such a broad range of miles per gallon vehicles, are you going to touch on anything that would be all the way to the range of a totally electric vehicle that uses no gasoline, and then incrementally change it based on some type of theoretical miles per gallon?
Well, that's the kind of the interesting part. If you don't really have an incentive, if you're somebody who doesn't drive very often, you probably wouldn't want the flat fee option because you're going to be paying for miles that you're not driving. You're not driving 3,000 miles a month. There are a lot of people in urban areas in Georgia that are probably drive, I guess like myself, I drive maybe 6,000 miles a year. That wouldn't make sense for me. So for me, I would probably choose something far to the right where it's actually calculating how many miles I'm driving. And the other thing that is kind of a concern we'll talk about more is the rural versus urban driver, that the urban driver tends to drive the more fuel-efficient, newer vehicles, whereas rural has, more of the trucks and less fuel-efficient vehicles, so they're paying more in gas tax right now. So this actually could kind of even out the playing field a little bit. And so I guess going into these other options, the next one over is the odometer reading, which would just be an annual reporting of your odometer. The mileage counter is actually that device that plugs into there. Every car has an input for that device at different places within the vehicle, but will calculate the mileage that you're driving. And the important thing is that all that's reported and used to calculate the amount that you're driving is, it basically is an input on the technology on the other side that says, this is the number of miles. That's it. You don't know where you are on those miles, what time of day. There's no GPS coordinates at all. So also kind of takes more into account the privacy concerns that some individuals have, but then more accurately captures the miles they're actually driving.
But you get charged for outside of the state as well if you go that route.
So that's the negative of the options on the left side, is that if you go on a road trip to Florida for the weekend, you can't turn it off, so those miles are going to be counted. You're not going to get a gas tax reimbursement. Whereas, so then you go over to the right side, the option you have a smartphone or in-vehicle telematics, where a lot of people that have newer cars, you're already seeing this stuff implemented. We have OnStar, you Blue Link, these different things where it's already reporting your mileage to your manufacturer, and that's the direction that they're going to.
I get regular notices telling me what my mileage is.
Exactly. So they already know it's already being reported, and that's the direction that vehicle manufacturers are going at this point. In the same hand, smartphone technology, cell phone providers, they have the location switches. All these things are already built into our smartphones for the most part. So it's just utilizing technology that's already there, which is another kind of positive to that as technology changes externally, the system can go with that new technology. You're not dealing with the in-house technology. This is an external feature, basically. So the great part is that you have the user flexibility that if you drive out of state, it shows that you're outside the state line, so you can get a gas tax reimbursement for those miles traveled. You won't be charged for that VMT since it's outside the state. And it'll get smoother as interjurisdictional agreements are get together with other states and some of the federal stuff gets worked out. But in the meantime, it gives you that flexibility. There is that lower perception of privacy, but in reality, still the only outputs that you're getting from these technology devices is the number of miles that you drove. So it's not going to report back where those miles were, what time, what kind of road that was, unless you want it to. So it's all about the choice and the flexibility within that. We can come back to this slide if we need to. This is just a high-level overview of kind of the process within the system. You're starting with assessing the charges for the miles that you're driving on the left-hand side. You'd have a customer account where the charges would get posted to. Then there's the collection of payments, various different options, which also increase with technology and improvements. And these are all external sites. This is not something that the state has to develop. There are already third-party providers out there that, as long as you provide the requirements for them, they can provide the technology. And then they can be in charge of increasing and improving that technology as things are innovated and get better. Then you have reconciling and distributing the funds, and this is where you come in with okay, there's the local, the state pieces. How do you divide where the funding is going to? And that is up to you guys to decide what you're comfortable with and what fits for the state. And then, of course, is producing these reports and looking for fraud and continuity and understanding and being able to plan for the future. So, again, common misconceptions about road user charges. A lot of people think that driver privacy is sacrificed, and that makes people a lot of people really nervous, understandably. So the important thing to understand is that there is a choice. You could just do the flat rate reporting if you wanted to, if that makes you more comfortable. It depends on the lifestyle you have, how much you drive, and what's more important to you as a user. And At the same time, regardless of which option you choose, privacy is fully protected because the outputs that are going into the system are not being stored, are not being tracked. And in the Oregon system, they actually deleted the information after 30 days. So every 30 days, the information is purged. So it's not even staying there. And all the information that was there was how many miles you drove. So the other thing is that the road user charge is just another tax charged by the government. This is more of a measuring of a usage. This is a true user fee. It can coexist with gas taxes in other states, and you can have the reciprocity agreements formalized, but it restores equity to the users. It's instead of, for the vehicles that are maybe lower efficient mileage vehicles, it's an even based on the amount of wear and tear that you're putting on the road that you're driving, the mileage you're putting on. Another common misconception, which might be a concern, especially in Georgia, is that rural drivers are being unfairly penalized since they are typically driving longer distances. But what they found is that since most rural drivers are already paying more in gas tax because they have less fuel-efficient vehicles, that it actually could potentially help them. If there is still a concern, there are policy choices that you have in terms of being able to kind of measure properly when you're on private roads versus public roads, of when people are on their own property that they're not paying, and there's different considerations you can take in there.
So you're saying as rural drivers, we drive big pickup trucks, and so therefore.
Yeah, you eat up the
You
road.
work a lot.
Yeah,
You beat up my city road every time you come into the
rednecks
city.
driving down there. Yeah, I get it.
We'll charge you double.
There you go.
Shave less, too.
Saving money. Saving money.
This guy's got a black helicopter circling over his
Oh,
head.
geez.
Wait till we get.
So the important part is in really being successful with road user charges is protecting people's privacy, overcoming that public perception of lack of privacy, which is where public engagement is really important, and especially in the early phases of implementation for this. And the important thing to emphasize again is the choice of how the usage is measured, and then the payment options with that. And then again, this is long term. This is where cell phone providers, car manufacturers are going, and there is discussion at the federal level talking about a seamless interstate program. Eventually we will get there, but this is long-term solution that we're talking about. Just looking at what's going on around the country, Oregon is the only state that has fully implemented legislation. They've gone through 2 pilot studies at this point. A couple other states have conducted pilot studies, including Washington, Nevada, and Minnesota. And then a lot of other states right now are working on legislation to at least create a task force to study the road user charge. My firm's been helping in Illinois and California in creating legislation to enable studying and doing pilot studies to see if this will be a feasible solution for those states. So moving forward, if you decide to do this as a road user charge in Georgia, the first step would be to create a user fee task force or a study committee, and you as a committee could choose to make that recommendation. From there, the task force would then come back with recommendations for criteria of how to implement the pilot, and then have the pilot completed, and then with those results decide whether or not that this is something that Georgia wants to do, if it's going to be successful, and if it should be expanded moving forward. And
So you're recommending that our committee create another committee to do a study?
the other option is not to create another committee, but just to make a recommendation to do a pilot study.
Let me ask you a question. I'm looking at it. What if we did like Florida? For every registered vehicle in the state of Florida, you register, you pay a $200 fee, whether it's an electric car, motorcycle, car, period. If you move in the state of Florida, you change your registration and move to the state of Florida, you bring 5 cars, you pay $200 per vehicle, and that goes straight to transportation, that go toward getting your tag and everything. What if we did that in Georgia?
And that's basically the flat fee option, where you just say, here's your annual cost.
Would you be for that? Because how many cars you got? Do you have 2 or 3 cars?
I'm a millennial, so I don't drive very much, and I have one car. So I'm a. So that.
We charge you $200.
Right.
And that goes directly to transportation fee.
So technically, for somebody like me, there's not much incentive for me there. It's not something that appeals to me, but for a lot of people it does. So that might make sense, and that's fine. I mean, that's the state's choice ultimately. Every single option I think kind of resonates with a different demographic. So that's why kind of the outreach and understanding what appeals to most people within the state I think is kind of important.
Chairman.
Are you saying that there is a real transportation need in Georgia to fix the roads, do everything in the city and rural communities? Are you saying that is a real need? Question with yourself. I mean, I'm looking at the presentation that you presented. But are you saying there is a real need to fix transportation in Georgia?
I think so. I mean, every other presentation that's come up has said, this is our need and this is the gap we need to fill.
We've done a lot of things with transportation. Put some in the general fund, and then when the Olympics came, we took money that we were putting in transportation and put it out to help fund the Olympics to bring it together. Never gave the money back to you. What about, would you support 1 cent sales tax? I'm not talking about motor fuel, I'm talking about sales tax. And that would raise about 1.3 billion that would go into transportation. Would you as a citizen support that?
I would, but I think I'm a little bit biased. I would support it, but I think I'm a little biased because I care about transportation a lot. I mean, that's the issue I'm most passionate about. So,
I'm trying to find a lot of folks who are biased about transportation.
Well, I'm on the board of an organization called Young Professionals in Transportation. We have an Atlanta chapter, and we are trying to increase awareness of, especially among young people, for the needs that we have in transportation, especially in the metro area. So hopefully we can help in advocacy in any way. No, it's good.
Chris.
This question might be better asked to the commissioner. But currently, if you buy an all-electric vehicle in Georgia, is there any type of fee at all that you pay? There's a credit, and you get to drive in the nice lane without anybody there, right? So there's double benefits, and you use the system, but you pay no fee at all. So no fee at all. So my question then is, do you know of other states that have done something like this just for the electric vehicles?
Not specifically just guided towards them. It's more of an all-encompassing opt-in voluntary pilot studies that's been done so far.
So do you know of any other state that has a different mechanism for gathering fees from the electric vehicles?
No, I could be wrong, but I feel like California has discussed that as a possible change. They're doing an annual fee, but
yeah, that means specific, but not Oregon's not just for electric, right? It's for all vehicles.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah. You finished?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I have a question. If we adopted this kind of a policy and we started to wean ourselves away from the gas tax 100%, and we went strictly to a VMT type policy to fund transportation, the gas tax would drop 40, 50 cents per gallon off the price of gas in Georgia. Is that correct? No. 40 cents a gallon?
The federal
well, still got to pay 18.4 cents federal.
It's dropped about 26,
Well, that's true. So you'd have the gas, the state portion, 30 cents?
Dropped 20 something.
Okay. What are the odds that the gas stations in Georgia would drop the price of gas the entire 100%? Or would they absorb that opportunity to make more profits?
That's what they would do.
Do you have a theory on that?
I don't, but that's a reasonable concern.
If
They-
Tennessee, South Carolina, Florida still have the state sales tax or the state excise tax, Georgia doesn't. If they keep their gas prices 10 cents below those other states, they're going to absorb a bigger profit, would they not? Does that make sense?
So you oppose the free market?
I think eventually the market will.
We can have these conversations, but go ahead.
Startup costs. That's what I was curious about. Let's just say Georgia went to this. Do you have any kind of estimation what the startup cost of the state would be to put this into place?
I don't have the numbers, but it is a significant investment up front. So creating the full system, hopefully you can tap into the back infrastructure that you already have within GDOT or CERTA. But it is a significant investment up front, and then it's minimal going forward. The key is kind of utilizing private companies, private sector to create the technology instead of having to develop it in-house.
Are you familiar with the term swag? Scientific wild ass guess. So I'm not going to hold you. Can you give me a rate and say significant?
I don't want to give you. I literally have none of those kind of numbers with me, so I can get you that.
I appreciate that. You gave a great presentation. Late today we get a little bit.
It's after lunch.
Could you address how to deal with out-of-state tourists driving through our state, living like in Fannin County, for example, with a huge part-time population of Floridians up here?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? There's no income tax in Florida, so they keep their residency down there.
Right.
And they live here part of the year.
That is.
How do you capture those folks?
In the short term, it would be just by maintaining the gas tax that they would have to pay. The hard part is getting those, getting other states on board. Florida is considering doing something similar, but getting those interjurisdictional agreements together with other states around you and getting that kind of federal base of how it's going to work between the states, because you're missing out on that otherwise.
All right.
Any other questions?
Okay.
You know Holiday?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You know Holiday?
My father.
Oh, he's a good friend of mine.
All right. Mr. Frank, come on down. Andre, do we have any thing for sign up?
Do we need a stretch break after lunch? You good, Mark?
Have you got a presentation?
I do not have a presentation, so I'm just going to talk briefly. Is that all right?
You're the man, Frank.
Okay. To answer Chris's question, because he threw that out about the electric car tax, on the internet it says that Virginia was proposing a $47 tax increase last year for Tesla owners, and I would imagine Leaf owners, like myself. All right. So in full disclosure, I'm not a millennium. If you were wondering. But I do drive a Nissan Leaf, and I am taking advantage of the tax credit. It was built there. I'm using it. But I parked my F-350 diesel that was getting 12, 14 miles to the gallon. All right. So nobody cared when I was putting $150 every 2 weeks into the tank. Personally, if you want to do what Virginia did, and if it was $47 or $100, and remember, I'm talking about myself as a Leaf owner, I would pay that. I recognize that because I am biased. I can't argue for wanting transportation to be improved at the same time driving on the roads and not paying my fair share. So I'm a Leaf owner. Charge me what you think is reasonable, and I'll pay it and move on and be glad to do that. All right? But I just want to take a minute and tell you a little bit about UPS and where we're at on transportation issues. And I appreciate that you're taking this on because from a personal perspective, 2 years ago, I was out in front of UPSers talking about T-Splosh and why, as a transportation company, we should be in favor of that. And I took a lot of tough questions. Some folks from the chamber came and helped me out to take those tough questions. But even as a transportation company, it was not an easy sell that everybody that worked at UPS ought to be supporting this T-Splosh vote and this 1% increase. So, and we know the results of that. So, But just to tell you a little bit about UPS, at any one given time, we have in our system, in our brown vehicles, our trailers, our planes, 6% of the U.S. GDP. The value of the goods in our system, 6% of the U.S. GDP, 2% of the world's GDP. So all that is to say is we have a lot of stuff in our vehicles that we're delivering. On average, we deliver about 17 million packages a day. And we're a multimodal carrier. So those packages are in our trucks and trailers going down the highways. We take our trailers to the rail yards to put them on the trains because that's an efficient way to move trailers. We buy a lot of space on ocean-going vessels in order to move product back and forth between the U.S. and other countries. But we are dependent on all those multimodal means to be efficient, to operate, be consistent, be safe, and very important to us. Last year, we drove 2.9 billion miles to deliver all the packages and letters that we deliver. 2.9 billion miles. We used 330 million gallons of fuel for trucks and package cars. We bought another 776 million gallons of jet fuel. So the miles per package on the jets are not nearly as good on the trucks and trains. So we buy a lot of fuel. To bring it home to Georgia, we drove 70 million miles in Georgia last year. We expect that to go up a couple % this year. It would go up more if we were not investing in technology to reduce miles in order to streamline routes, reduce the amount of turns and backtracking and all of that. And we've invested heavily in technology to be able to do that. So miles are very important to us, and reducing those miles are very important. We picked up 7,200 trailers at the rail yards in Georgia. So trailers coming in from across the country, pick them up, took them to our hubs, unloaded them, turned around, put the packages in trailers, other trailers, or in delivery vehicles. 7,200 trailers bringing freight into Georgia that we picked up. We have 13,500 employees in Georgia. Our corporate presence is here also, so that ups the number a little bit. We got about 4,500 retirees. For Christmas, to deliver everybody's packages, hopefully, we're going to hire about 95,000 to 98,000 people this year for Christmas. In Georgia, that's about 3,500 people that we'll hire. We're doing right now, and hopefully have them all on the week after Thanksgiving. And I need to stop right there and encourage everybody, please shop early, order early, get online if you're going to do that, but get it done early. We'd appreciate that. Our peak day, remember I said 17 million is an average? Our peak day is going to be 34 million packages. We're going to double our volume. And in order to get ready for that, we spent a lot of money in facilities and adding additional sorts. Our Roswell Center, we added a mobile unit to be able to put 90 cars out in the parking lot to be able to deliver. We have bought or leased parking lots around the state to be able to store stage trailers in order to do this. So we're investing a lot of money to be ready for Christmas. So what does that all mean? It gets back to we are dependent on the roads to make things happen, and the rail yard, and the ports, and the airport. We are multimodal. So we've seen numbers today about the number of roads that we have in Georgia and about the funding issues. We recognize there's a funding issue. For many, many years, we were ones that were saying, yeah, we don't think raising the gas tax is a good idea unless it could be dedicated. Even before that, we were opposed to that. We are not opposed to raising the fuel tax. And we know that that might be a sensitive issue for some folks, but when you look at the needs that need to take place, in our mind, the most efficient way to do that, and it's not the only way, but the most efficient way to do that is to raise the gas tax. I mean, we could be looking at a new gas tax in Georgia March, April of next year. If the feds hadn't kicked the can down the road, we would be looking at a new highway bill that could have more funding. Instead, they're not going to deal with that until May, June, July. So we use the roads. We depend on the roads, the bridges. You know, Commissioner Golden put up the number of bridges that are in jeopardy. What do you think happens when we have weight limits on bridges? You know, we have 58 small package operations in Georgia.
So you need that increased, right? No, listen, you don't have the floor.
No, I told my friends with the trains we wouldn't talk about weight issues. But we have 58 small package facilities across the state. We have another 20 that are in specialized services or healthcare across the state in order to do what we do. And I'll give you an example of competitiveness on behalf of one of our customers. We have 2 healthcare facilities, Lawrenceville and Suwanee. We store and hold medicine on behalf of customers. One building has many customers in it. The other building is dedicated to Merck only. We have their product in there. We have a very large cold storage facility. So it's not our product. They tender it to us. We hold on to it until they give us the orders to ship. Now, as you can imagine, this is cold storage. The stuff has to get down the road, get to its destination, whether it's to a doctor's or a pharmacy or a hospital. Oftentimes it ships overnight. So imagine the travel time from Lawrenceville down to Hartsville-Jackson. We need that time to be consistent. We need that time to be able to rely on that, because what we're doing on behalf of that customer is taking orders. And then at some point, what do you have to do? You have to cut off orders in order to make sure that that plane gets down to the airport, take the packages off the trailer gets down to the airport, take the packages off the trailer, put it in a container, get that container on a plane, get that plane out of Hartsville to Louisville, to our all points gateway. We call it Worldport, so that that product can be delivered the next day. If the congestion continues, or if there isn't consistency in that travel time, what do we tell Merck? Well, we have to back off that order time. Now, you could apply that to any customer in any one of the 159 counties and locations where we have our operations. Everybody wants the latest pickup. Everybody wants the earliest delivery and the latest pickup. Our ability to do that is dependent upon the roads being the system being reliable and consistent and safe. Some bigger numbers. Think about this. Americans spend 5.5 billion hours in traffic each year, according to a White House report, costing families $120 billion in extra fuel and lost income. And businesses likewise spend $27 billion annually in extra freight and costs and shipping delays for everyday products. A 5-minute delay every day for a year for our drivers is between $105 and $108 million. So we have an investment to make sure, we have an invested interest to make sure that we don't have those delays, to be able to get our folks that they're constantly out, being able to move along smoothly and deliver. American Transportation Research Institute, based in Marietta, produces a report every year. Top 100 congested areas, intersections and areas. Georgia has 4. 2 of them are in the top 25. They're all related to 285, either going 85, 75, or 20. And I'm sure there's other examples of congestion that we could look at and consider. The situation only gets worse when you look at growth. The Census Bureau says the U.S. population is going to increase by 20% by 2040. So for us, that probably means what, 2 to 3 more million Georgians by 2040? DOT says that all of us require 57 tons of goods per person per year to live, to eat, to wear the clothing that we wear. 57 tons. I don't know if that's exactly right. I don't know about 57 tons. That's a big number. How are we going to be able to move that 57 tons when we have those 2 or 3 more million people in Georgia? We can't afford these delays. The Federal Highway Administration predicts that over the next 30 years, the number of trucks on the road in order to address this growing population is going to grow by 60% to keep pace with demand. So this only translates to more stop and start situations. And some of you might ask, well, why don't we just put more vehicles on rails? And we are one of the largest rail customers, putting our trailers on the rails. But the rails are in the same situation. And I reviewed this with Craig Camuso before lunch. I told him what I was going to say, and he totally agreed. So I'll say it. DOT predicts that there's going to be an 88% increase in rail freight demand by 2035. 88% increase by 2035. That's not that far away. we use the rails because it's efficient and it meets our demanding time schedules. When it doesn't meet our time schedules, we have to put trailers on the road. What does that mean? More trucks and trailers on the road, more drivers on the road. But rail is expensive to build and maintain, and this is a fact that constrains companies and businesses that rely on them to move large quantities of goods. So we're already there with the rails. There's going to be greater demand upon them. So what's the answer? We know we need to address infrastructure, and it's not just I have peers that have these conversations with other state chambers and trucking associations. We talk about this. But if you're looking at Georgia and looking at Georgia growing jobs and being competitive and bringing on more businesses, then Georgia's competing with, I don't know, maybe not Hawaii and Alaska, but 47 other states in order to bring businesses. And I often think about, we hear these success stories about companies coming to Georgia because of X, Y, and Z. We've got great announcements, and hopefully those announcements will continue. Here's one of the things that we probably don't hear often enough, and maybe you know this in private conversations, but I think about this. Who did we lose, and why did we lose them? And did we lose them because they know that Georgia's not doing anything about transportation? Or that they know that what they know about transportation is that there's congestion, it's tough, it's bad, the reputation's there. And when we're telling the stories about coming to Georgia, and the chambers are doing that, or the governor's office is doing that, or Chris Carr and his staff are doing that, what are they able to say that we're doing to address it? Now, why is that important to me and UPS in Georgia? We only grow and we only hire if people shop more, businesses ship more, or they buy more and they bring it in. So we're not going to add more people at UPS, and these are good paying jobs. We're not going to add any more people at UPS unless there's a reason to do that, unless there's more packages coming out of Joe's ABC shop, whatever that might be. So as you think about competitive challenges and Georgia maintaining competitiveness, maybe you have these conversations privately, we absolutely have to be losing some of those bids and those company relocations because of our transportation issues. So wouldn't it be great come March, April, or May, there's a bill signing, and the governor and all of you were there, and there's a bill signing that says this is what Georgia's doing about transportation, and this is what it looks like. And I know the answers aren't easy, but as a company, we were invested in T-Splosh. We'll be invested to help move this forward. Encourage you to be bold, and I think I heard this morning, show some resolve to have a good plan to be able to help us, UPS in Georgia, grow and help citizens in Georgia. So with that, I'll take any questions if there's any.
Let me ask you, Frank, you and I have had conversations before about going to alternative fuel vehicles. Y'all going transform over to natural gas and all. If you were to implement a fee for alternative fuel vehicles, what would you consider from y'all standpoint to be a fair fee? Because you have expressed to us, we're not trying to get out of paying motor fuel. We want to go green. We want to get rid of that fuel independence. Get that independence, and so we want to try to help you to get there. But you also want to pay for that because you are still on the roads. And what figure would you?
The gas gallon equivalent or the diesel gallon equivalent? So gas gallon equivalent is the industry standard for CNG. We are paying that in Georgia already. Last session, AGL worked on giving I believe the Department of Revenue the ability to assess a tax on LNG, because right now I don't think there's very few that are running LNG tractors right now, and we would argue, and the industry standard is to be the diesel gallon equivalent tax. So we're not running alternative fuels to get out of paying gas or diesel gallon equivalent taxes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Two things. Just as what you mentioned, Monday I shipped a letter to a client in Ohio, and when I went to the UPS store to do that, they told me the price, and they said, but if you need it by 10 a.m. for $1 more, we'll pay you. And so I did. But the point is that obviously UPS is not going to guarantee that 10 a.m. unless there's some predictability. I'm assuming this is one of the big issues that you're talking about, that with this huge fleet out there, you need to know how long it's going to take for that vehicle to get there.
Absolutely.
Road congestion is the unknown.
Absolutely. And in your case, and our business model is we do guarantee those. And if there is an accident, traffic congestion or something like that, and we're late, you're still owed your guarantee. But we'd like to not have to pay that. We'd like to get it there on time or early.
And I'll get it or I'll call you.
Yeah, absolutely.
The second thing, I want to publicly, I think I heard you say, UPS, speaking for the organization, supports a motor fuel tax increase in order to accomplish what we need to accomplish.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We're a member of the American Trucking Association, the Federation. They believe in that also. And they're advocating for that.
That's potentially a pretty big cost to the corporation.
It is. But as I talked about delays and the cost for delays and what that means to us, and we use the roads. We've got to have good, safe roads in order to do our business. Yes, Chairman.
Other than Metro Atlanta, where are you seeing your most congested areas in the state for your drivers? Interstate routes or?
Yeah, there are pinch points. That American Transportation Research study, it talks about many countrywide, the 100 choke points. So if we're running up 75 into Tennessee, there are choke points there, and I can share that with you where you'll see the choke points. But it's nationwide.
But in Georgia, though, can you give me specific areas?
Well, getting down to the airport, getting to the airport, getting out of the airport.
Outside of Atlanta.
Okay.
Outside of Atlanta.
I'm not sure that I can.
85 north going to South Carolina?
Very busy truck corridor. Yes, absolutely.
75.
Down into Florida, 95.
How many UPS trucks, and I know that you can't answer this by the number, but that come into Georgia have to come through Atlanta to stop?
Into Georgia, have to go through. Well,
if we had alternate routes around Atlanta, for example, would that benefit your operation?
It might. Depends on what that alternate route looks like, how far that route goes, and whether it's truly an interstate with no stoplights, or it's an expressway with limited access. I think that that's important. When you look at our delivery model in Atlanta, we're at Pleasantdale and at 20 and 285 almost, or down 20. So those are our two delivery centers for Atlanta. So we try not to go through into the city. That's up for the delivery drivers, absolutely. But our corridors are 20, 85, 95, 75, as you would expect.
All right. Thank you, Frank. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your willingness to work with us, too. We appreciate that. UPS does a good job with that. We appreciate y'all and what y'all's investment y'all made in Georgia. All right. Ms. Jan, would you like to come speak now? Yes, ma'am.
Better late than never. I'm here to welcome you to Blue Ridge and Fannin County. I couldn't join you last night at dinner, and we had an eggs and issues breakfast this morning, and then we had a chamber board meeting, so I've been in and out of the room. But I want to thank you so much for coming to Blue Ridge for your meeting and for your support and the work you're doing to try to improve transportation funding and transportation in Georgia. I won't go too far. 20 years ago plus, I was at the Rome Chamber, and we were talking about raising the gas tax. And Rome was talking about getting a direct access to the internet. 20 years ahead, we're still talking about gas taxes, and Rome still does not have a direct access to I-75. So some things changed. Fannin County, 30 years ago, 515, the ARC corridor was finished. And I don't think you have to tell anybody who lives in Blue Ridge and Fannin County what a 4-lane highway can do for economic development. We have 4,000 second homes here out of 16,000. 35% of our market's in Florida. They come straight up. So we supported what you were doing with the T-Splost. We're going to support anything you do that is reasonable, and just wanted to let you know that, and thank you for coming, and anything we can do to help, you know we're here.
Thank you.
Hold on. Senator Lucas got a question. Too.
You said something very interesting 20 years ago, and you were wrong. What we are faced with in today's society right now, and in the state of Georgia, is that we, over the years, and I've been in the legislature for a long time, we diverted monies to do various things. We had money for transportation, and when the Olympics came, we wanted to put our best foot forward, and we cut a deal with DOT to transfer money out and use it for the Olympics, and give it back to them, which we never gave it back to them. We now have probably we're going to have the largest port on the East Coast with the deepening of the harbor. They just signed a contract with Mercedes-Benz in Alabama to ship all the Mercedes they make overseas from the Savannah port. We got an interstate system that we had kept up very much, our state roads, but yet and still, this port is going to provide jobs to a lot of Georgians. Would you, as a citizen, looking at the overall thing and understanding that chambers are always interested how to create economic development and bring jobs to their community, would you even look or consider a 1 cent sales tax, which is more than a 1 cent on the motor fuel, and looking at that as far as it going to transportation? And the only way we can do that is we have to commit ourselves as political individuals, because the only way you can dedicate money is through a constitutional amendment. But our need is so great, and our need was yesterday, not today. Do you think that you as a citizen, and understand that what we are faced with right now, do you think you could support a 1 cent sales tax to help do that?
Everything's relative. I think that the citizens here in the mountains especially, they want to know that it's going to be an equitable distribution of any funds that are raised. So it's all relative. The Tennessee folks that come over here and shop, they pay more taxes over in Tennessee than they pay when they shop over here, especially for groceries, since they're coming to buy groceries across the state line. So I think that it's all relative to where you are in the state, what state line you're sitting on. I'm not certain that a user tax, like a gas tax, might look better than an overall 1 cent sales tax myself, but that's just me speaking. But anything that you do, I would encourage you to make sure that the people in the rural areas know that, that there's going to be an equitable distribution of funds through the rural areas too. And the people here have been waiting for some kind of a solution to the problems we have on Highway 5 for 20 plus years too. We've got a casino that's going to be built in Murphy, North Carolina, right across the state line. Highway 60 spur. The reason they're doing it is to draw more traffic from Atlanta. So we expect people to be coming up 575 Highway spur. There's a lot of things all over the state that need to be done. But I think maybe a user solution might be better accepted by the voters.
Well, it matters what you say. Don't think it does.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, and we appreciate y'all being a gracious host, and we thank you. All right. I don't see Sean.
Yeah,
He's here. Oh, dadgummit. He's asleep.
hang on.
You got a PowerPoint?
I do.
Is it a long PowerPoint?
60, 70 pages, all right?
No. We're going to just stand adjourned.
No, it's only 5. It'll be quick. Everybody should have a copy. It won't have all the handwriting on it, but should have a copy with you, I think. Is it passed out? Andrew? Yeah, we got it. You got it? Okay, perfect. That's essentially the PowerPoint as well.
So is there any need for you even discussing it? You've already given it.
Probably not. I don't know how much I can add to this conversation. And I actually, Chairman, members of the committee, one of the reasons why I'm doing this today is I do want to start by saying from ACCG's standpoint, we do have a pretty extensive policy platform position on transportation funding. We did make it one of our top 3 priorities, and those are proactive priorities, which means we are committed to working with this committee and the overall body to find solutions for new revenue across the state, both state and local level, because we understand that investment is needed. Part of what you're going to see today on some of these graphs really just shows the commitment that local governments do have to transportation in terms of what they're funding and how that funding is happening at the local level, because I know there's been some question about our local pennies, how that works collected on motor fuel, so I'm hoping to just really clarify that for you. They got it in front of them. It'll be all right. Everybody has a copy in front of you, right?
Yes.
We're having technical difficulties, so in the essence of time, I'll just run you through that way. Apologize to those in the audience, but if anybody wants a copy of this, we'll be happy to email it to you. Okay. So with that in mind, I know Senator Gooch back in the ABAC asked for some data from local governments regarding this. We did present, along with GMA, a joint letter during the Augusta meeting. That first slide on page 1 that you see there is a summary of that joint letter that we provided. And just a couple points I want to make to that slide for you. One, the $516 million roughly that's collected on local sales tax collected on motor fuel, that also includes the MARTA penny, which is about $24 million a year. So if you consider that to be a transportation investment and you back that out of there, you're down close to that $490 million range. It also includes most, but I know that's water or sewer in Atlanta. But wanted to point out about MARTA, and also the $1.337 billion you see on the local government investment level, that does not include T-SPLOS or LMIG funds.
What was the MARTA penny?
Roughly $24 billion between the 2 counties total, just on motor fuel. Million, sorry. I'm trying to give them a little more money, I guess. Scott, I'm trying to help you out. So, and also the local government investment, like I just said, does not include T-SPLOS in the TIA regions and does not include LMIG, which is roughly $122 million a year from GDOT. The third slide, which is actually on page 2, for y'all, what this is meant to do, there were some questions about, okay, well, we understand you may be investing in transportation, but lost is not going to transportation necessarily. Or, you know, we can show easily where SPLOST, where they have a project list that's dedicated to transportation, and you can see that, which is a center column there in that graph on the top of page 2. Statewide, $740 million a year is dedicated to transportation projects on existing SPLOST. So that's pretty easy to show. County by county can show it. The referendum's out there. It has those projects on there. You can see that. Lost, on the other hand, that's an operations penny that's meant to be a property tax rollback in those jurisdictions where revenue is brought up. So I understand the question of saying, okay, well, loss isn't necessarily being spent on transportation. But if you look at that third column there, the local expenditures, that's lost and ad val and fees. That near $600 million is coming out of the general fund of local governments, which is what that loss penny helps to support. And so you can see there from a local government standpoint, they are investing capital projects aside in their operations and maintenance, roughly $600 million a year statewide, which that in of itself also exceeds what they're getting on the motor fuel with their local sales taxes. Other thing I want to point out here, what I'm focusing on is lost and SPLOST only, the education SPLOST. That's through the Board of Education. The county, we collect it and distribute it to them, but we don't have any control over it other than that. I know that the courts have said they can't spend on transportation. They don't. But these numbers here are going to focus on strictly lost and SPLOST that the counties control. So just want to make sure I point that out to you. Also, I've got a couple examples here because if you want to break it down a little further and say, okay, well, I see that statewide, that's great. Surely some counties are doing more than their share, cities are doing more than their share, but then there are others who may not be. Well, I've got 4 examples that I'm able to pull out pretty quickly to show you And what I want, the caveat I want to place in these examples is the motor fuel number that these counties are receiving. This number includes the city's share, so it's before we distribute the cities their share of the revenue to see what the counties have, because we haven't gotten the formula for each of these jurisdictions yet to break it down to be accurate. But despite that number including the city's share and comparing it against only the county budget, these 4 counties are investing far more in transportation at the county level than what they are receiving in motor fuel. Fannin County, where we are today, transportation budget roughly $6.6 million. They're collecting $711,000 on motor fuel. Again, that includes the city share. Bibb County, Senator Lucas, $11.2 million is their transportation budget, $7.3 on motor fuel. So they're almost doubling it. If you take the cities out of that aspect of it before, and I know you're consolidated now, so that's going to be a different plan. This was 2014, based on the budget they submit to DCA. Jackson County, and this isn't in there actually, I'm writing this down because I had to pull this out at the last minute. Jackson County, $6.3 million is their transportation portion of their budget. $3.5 million they collect on motor fuel. And in Forsyth County, Mr. Chairman, I know you bragged on them quite a bit. There's another opportunity for you to do so. $16.7 million is their transportation budget, roughly. They get $5.7 million on motor fuel, and obviously that doesn't count what they just did with the $200 million bond. So just about 3 times. And so that's an example of, you have a rural county, you've got suburban counties and an urban county, all of which have shown, even with the city share still being a part of that pot, that they're investing more in transportation than what they're collecting, Mr. Chairman.
Did you find any counties that brought in more than they spent?
There are some, because there are some outliers early on, but what I need to do before I can present those out is I want to pull the city share out to see exactly what that is, because we have some, let's see, which one do I have here? Haralson County, for instance. 57% of Haralson County's total sales tax revenue comes on motor fuel. It's a significant percentage. But they're only $133,000 in the red before you take out the city's distribution. So I don't know if that $133,000, if you back that out, what the city's distribution is, if it puts them in the black. But despite that high percentage, they're still very close. And to give you an idea for them, 11.07% of their budget is spent, their total budget is spent on transportation.
Where did you get those numbers? How did you go?
What we did with those numbers is we have, based on the budget they submit to DCA, they've got in there capital, equipment, operations, and maintenance for transportation. So we've taken that into consideration in terms of what their transportation budget is. And I can tell you how it compares to their total budget. For instance, Haralson, like I mentioned, is 11% of their total operating budget in Haralson County. And with that dollar amount, so Haralson is a little over $2.1 million is their transportation budget, and they get $2.2 million on motor fuel. And like I said, that's 57% of their total sales tax collection. But that motor fuel, again, is also including the city share as well. So if you break it down, you'll have even more counties and possibly more cities who are actually independently spending more than their share. But those 4 examples, even with it all in one pot compared to one budget, they're still exceeding it. And so the purpose of that is to help to understand that investment is being made. It is happening, and they are committed to it. Again, it doesn't include the education penny. The bottom slide there that you see is a comparison of the 3 levels of government that's investing in transportation, showing you where that money's coming from. It's almost about $3.5 billion, give or take, in the state of Georgia, as you can see there. Local government investment, again, tops out at $1.33 billion. That's more than the state by itself and more than the feds by itself in the state of Georgia. And I think they're okay with that. They do have roughly counties themselves 70% of the road, local government's about 80% of the road. So that, they understand the importance of investment, and they're doing just that. Reason why I want to show that, though, as well, is because we're here because we know we have a funding gap. The commissioner has showed that in multiple meetings. He showed those, just the projects we've identified, what we need to get there. That's new revenue is what it's going to take to make that happen. And I know we've put a lot of ideas on the table, and the only concern that we've really had of any conversation is just the idea of a policy that removes the local government, the local sales tax on motor fuel, and takes it and gives it to the state or does whatever with it. It leaves a gap. And what that gap is going to have to be filled somewhere by the local governments, and I've got a final slide to really point to that. But we understand we need new revenue trying to level that bar out between local and state investment with $500 million will not change the landscape of Georgia, will not keep us moving forward, just change the pot the money's coming out of. We want to help be a part of what's actually going to increase those bars across the board, ideally in those first 2 bars, and really make something happen that way. And with the last slide, to kind of segue into that, keep this quick, that last page, what this is going to show here, if local governments have a reduction in revenue in this capacity, they've got a couple things that they can do to try to offset it. One is to reduce investment, back out what they're spending, and bring it back down to what they're actually taking in, since we have to have a balanced budget just like the state. Which means in SPLOST, if you take this money off of current SPLOST revenues, you're talking anywhere from 10 to 50% depending on the jurisdiction. Then those are SPLOST projects on the back end either aren't going to get completed, are going to get delayed, or going to have to be scaled down significantly. And we know how voters get if they go out there and they vote for something and they don't see it come to fruition, they're going to lose confidence, and in this case, our local officials and their ability to come through, which means they're less likely to vote for a subsequent SPLOST, which means even more revenue that local government loses down the road. And I think that they'll tie that into the state level as well from time to time, depending on what's out there. On the loss side of that, the less that loss brings in, the less property tax relief that the property taxpayers receive, because it's a direct rollback. So a local government is going to be charged with either offsetting that by raising property taxes to maintain the level of spending, to maintain the same property tax relief on loss, or to be able to get all those SPLOST projects done, or they're going to have to scale those SPLOST projects back, or reduce their transportation investment that you see on the general fund side to prevent them from having to raise property taxes. And this last page, what it shows you are 7 counties who responded to us and gave us what the value of a mill was in those counties. And you can see there that ranging anywhere from 1 3/4 to the most extreme on the list is a little over 4 mills, is what that one right there is. Dade County, which is about 40% on motor fuels, what they collect. That's what they would have to raise their property taxes just to offset the lost revenue on lost and SPLOST. So if there's an education penny in that county, the school boards are going to have to figure their side of it out too, because they're going to lose their share of the revenue as well. So this is property tax increase just as it relates to the county loss and SPLOST in those jurisdictions. And that last piece there is really just a visual to kind of see how much more those property taxes would increase in those jurisdictions.
All right, any questions? That's a rhetorical question, in case y'all were wondering.
One question.
Go ahead, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you. First off, I've raised this issue a few times to be sure you're not trying to take money away from the local government. I'm just trying to make sure that if they tax gasoline, that money goes directly to transportation, because that's where the voters think it's going to when they are at the pump. So there's a transparency issue involved in that. Secondly, you've sat through these meetings, and ACCG obviously has a vested interest in increasing transportation funding. What's ACCG's recommendation to this committee on how to increase transportation funding in the state of Georgia?
Well, as I mentioned, we have a pretty robust funding policy, and we are supportive of options that range from increasing the motor fuel tax, moving all the sales to an excise, moving it up to the rack rate. We're fine with a statewide penny as long as it's dedicated to transportation funding, not just going into the general fund like the fourth penny does now. Local excise tax on motor fuel, multi-jurisdictional SPLOST, these are all scenarios that are in there. Other various user fees, we talked about alternative fuel vehicle fee. I've looked at the Virginia model quite a bit. I know they wanted $100 to start with. They ended up on $64. Then a year later, they took it out. But I do think that that's something there. Our members have contemplated that as well. We've got our president, of course, beside you. He's welcome to weigh in at any point, too. We haven't tried to set up a multi-layered approach and said, okay, if you did this top to bottom, this is what's going to make all of our worries go away. But what we've said is these are a lot of areas that have been identified either by this committee or by our members that feel that any combination of these could potentially get us there. And we know there's not a silver bullet. We know just one thing's not going to get the job done. That is going to take that multi-layered approach, and we're willing to work with the committee on trying to find out that balance.
I'm just playing the role of the senator over here. Saying, okay, you come up here, you got
Chairman Hamlin. Any other questions? Any good?
Thank you, sir.
All right. Is there anyone that wishes to speak before we adjourn? Anyone that wishes to speak? Okay, come on. You want, probably, or you can right there, either one. Whichever one would be better for you.
I'm Lamar Parris, Union County Commissioner, and this is not an official statement for ACCG, but I think I certainly agree with a lot of what he said. My concern is trying to be practical and trying to be common sense. And when we rule out any particular part of this as saying we're not going to raise that, but we'll look for another area to do it, I think we're fooling ourselves. So if we say because of pressure from industry, for example, the trucking industry, they say we don't want any more gas tax, and we say, okay, we don't want to make you guys mad, so we'll lay out the excise tax. And if the fuel industry, the gas industry comes up and says, we're not going to put up with any increase in sales in gas tax whatsoever. This is a problem, as you all know, that we all have to work on, and we all have to take a beating on some part of it. And so I think it's critical that nothing is off the books, and that gas tax, maybe, I think we've heard the number 20 cents is what we would need. Well, what if we go and we get 5 cents from that, or we get 6 cents from that? And if the guy who says you're not going to get a penny of gas tax, and he's not interested in solving our solution. So when anybody says that any part of this, the gas tax, the excise tax, the sales tax, that we're pulling any of that off the board, and we're saying, whoever that is that's saying that is saying, I'm not interested in working with the state of Georgia to solve this problem. So my suggestion to you guys is, I don't have that bullet. I appreciate y'all putting yourselves on the line to try to come up with something, but let's do it common sense, and let's realize that everybody has to be in on this, and everybody has to work, and everybody has to give, and one legislator is not going to agree with the next one on what they think is the best way to do it, but it's going to take all of us giving and taking to make it work. So that's all I've got. Thank y'all.
Thank you. And we agree. That's been our message from the beginning. Nothing's off the table. All right, anybody else? Steve, I wasn't going to recognize you. And as the preacher says, speak now, forever hold your peace. With that being said, tomorrow, does everybody have the details of where they're supposed to be? We're going to start at 9 in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning in Rome. That will be our last meeting. So, anybody else? With that being said, thank y'all. Thank you, Fannin County, for what y'all have done. Y'all been a gracious host, and we appreciate that. We're now adjourned. Shit, I don't know.